is the Conscious Radio Network.
Wanted to welcome everybody to Conscious Radio Network. We have a special guest this evening, Andrea Perron. She's the oldest sister of the Perron family, 5 sisters. For those who remember the hit horror movie last year, The Conjuring, she is the inspiration, or brought the inspiration. So tonight we're going to touch base on some of the true accounts that was left out by Hollywood because it was too graphic. So anyway, I'm going to give the podium to you, Andrea, and start at the beginning of when you first was aware of the property, moving in and whatnot, and take it from there.
Well, thank you for having me on your broadcast. I appreciate being here. We need to go back decades, not years, in order to bring people up to snuff. And what I will do is introduce myself by saying that my name is Andrea Perron. I am the author of a trilogy of books called House of Darkness, House of Light. These were not the books that were actually used as a basis, a foundation for the screenplay for The Conjuring. The film The Conjuring was actually based primarily on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who conducted an investigation at the farm between October of 1973 and August of 1974. So it has elements of our story, and there are things in the film that are true, but they actually didn't reference any of the books directly. Not a single scene was lifted directly from any of the books because it would have been impossible for them to shear down 10 years into a 2-hour film. So essentially what they did was take information that I provided as a consultant on the film, and they took the information that was given to them by Mrs. Warren regarding their investigation of our property, and they created their own third story, which is The Conjuring. However, there were things that happened at that house that were so extreme and so violent. I don't even know. There were several episodes that occurred there. I don't know how they could be recreated on film if the technology exists to recreate them. But I will say that anyone who's brave enough and willing to suspend disbelief and willing to embrace the possibilities that exist, I would highly recommend that they read the books, because it's not a series of scary stories. This trilogy is a spiritual journey, and that's really what happened to our family. Living in that farm fundamentally changed every one of us in ways that were permanent, because once your mind is expanded, it cannot retract. So it changed each one of us, the 7 of us that lived in that house for 10 years, on that property for 10 years. It wasn't just the house. There was plenty of activity in the barn. There was plenty of activity in the woodshed. There was actual paranormal manifestations around the property. It was a 200-acre farm. My mother found it in June of 1970. The books start chronologically, and they end chronologically. Volume 1 begins in Cumberland, Rhode Island, prior to us moving to the farm. The end of Volume 3 is when we leave the farm and go as a family to Georgia. And in the process of doing that, discover that profound attachments were formed at the farm that were permanent in nature. However, from the moment that we arrive at the farm in Volume 1 until we leave it, it's pretty much all bets are off. I wanted to write it the way that I did because I wanted people to have a sense of the almost trance-like state of being there, the sense of timelessness about the place. And the best way for me to do that was to categorize the types of hauntings into their own chapters and subchapters. So, for instance, one chapter could be about Cindy at age 8 and a certain type of manifestation that occurred in the house with her at that time. The next story could be her at age 14, having something similar happen again, but profoundly different, and therefore requiring inclusion at that point in the story. So, a lot of people say, well, this is just written for spiritualists and intellectuals. But that's not the case. If people just open up their minds and absorb it and just read it in a very fluid way, then it sinks in and they start to feel like they actually lived at the farm with us.
Yeah.
My mother put money down on this farm the moment she saw it, within minutes of seeing it. She knew that it was compelling and incredibly beautiful place, and she wanted to raise her children at a place in the country, which is the title of the first chapter. It took 5.5 months for my parents to secure the financing to make this enormous purchase. It was in December of 1970 that we closed on the property. My parents closed on the property, but of course then Christmas was right around the corner, and my mother didn't want to move us at Christmas, nor was Mr. Kenyon, the man who sold the farm to our family, prepared to leave yet. He wasn't packed and ready to go. So we put off our trip to the farm up to the woods of Harrisville, Rhode Island, until January 11th, which is today, actually.
Oh, wow.
So in 1971, on January 11th, 1971, we moved to the farm. It was an extraordinary experience right from the moment that we got there. Now, keep in mind, we had visited this place a number of times, had gotten to know Mr. Kenyon very well. He loved us. We loved him. He really wanted us to have this house. He thought this would be a marvelous place for 5 little girls to have the opportunity to grow up, and he was absolutely right about that. However, I will say that all the times that we visited the farm, none of us recall ever having any kind of a supernatural episode. Nothing that we witnessed, nothing that we felt, nothing occurred to us of that nature. However, the day that we moved in, 4 of the 5 of us, the children, saw a full-body manifestation of a spirit standing in the corner of the dining room, watching Mr. Kenyon packing the last of his belongings out of the built-in china cabinet in the corner. And his focus was clearly on Mr. Kenyon. He appeared so solid in form to me that I thought that he was a real, living, breathing human being, and I greeted him and said good morning to him, and he ignored me like I was a ghost, and so I kept walking. But my sister Nancy saw him literally disappear.
Wow.
And it was that really started things. Cindy saw him, Christine saw him, April is the only one that didn't. But at one point, the thing that was most interesting to me was that at one point my father got off the back of the moving truck and he came into the house, and he was standing talking to Mr. Kenyon at the dining room table while Mr. Kenyon was packing a box, and that spirit was standing right there. We could all see him, but my father didn't.
So what do you suppose that is? Was this spirit sort of selective, possibly, in who he might have been showing himself to? And did you ever see this same spirit subsequent to this?
We saw him a multitude of times. My sister named him Manny. My sister Nancy named him Manny because he was a man and she was only 8 years old and not incredibly creative yet. So that's how he got his name. But subsequently, through my mother doing a plethora of historical research on people who had lived and died at the farm, she came to the conclusion that he was most likely Johnny Arnold, who had crawled up deep into the eaves of the farmhouse in the 1800s and had a bottle of horse liniment with him that he drank, and he died a really horrible death. His death was listed as a suicide, but chances are very good he just crawled up there with a bottle of horse liniment to try to get drunk, and it killed him. It's hard to say. I guess we'll never really know who any of them were. I mean, there were at least a dozen spirits that we saw over the course of that decade, some that we saw many times, some that we saw a few times, and some that we only saw once or twice. But for the most part, I would have to say that We certainly did develop a sense of who they were, and certainly developed the sense of their belonging there. My mother was always adamant about the fact that we should always have respect for the dead and that it was their house first.
Yeah.
Once we came to the notion, there was never any provocation in our family, never. There was no need to call them forth, because just when we slip into that lulled into that false sense of security, this must be over, there hasn't been anything that's happened in weeks or months, that's when it would happen.
Yeah. Now, when how much time went by until things started to really dramatize, really heighten in activity, actually physical phenomenon? Being pushed or shoved or pinched, or how much time went by after the move-in date?
About 2 weeks after we moved in. Well, the first thing that happened, and this is a bizarre thing, just as an aside, I will say there were things that happened at that house that I never wrote in the books, including the fact that our dog, our family pet, was inexplicably and bizarrely killed within days of us moving to the farm.
Mm.
It was such a difficult thing for me to write about. And after having written about what happened to our family and our family pets in Cumberland, I just didn't want it to be too morose for the reader. I didn't want anybody rolling their eyes going, I'm sorry, I can't handle this. This is too sad. Because it's titled House of Darkness, House of Light for a reason. It was both. And there were many wonderful, extraordinary experiences that occurred at the farm. But there were also some terrible things that happened there. And, chief among them was the loss of our family dog, Schultz, right after we got there. And I never told anybody associated with Warner Brothers, New Line Cinema, or The Conjuring, any of the producers, and I knew them all, and never told them that had happened, and yet it made it into the film. There were 4 or 5 little cosmic kisses in the film that told me after I saw it, this is okay, in spite of the fact that it does not properly reflect or depict your family the way things actually happened. It's still all right, because it gets the story out into the world in a way that nothing else could have. And in the broad strokes, it did get it right. Good conquers evil. Love conquers fear. The Perron family had an extreme haunting that they not only survived, but thrived and went on in life. And those are the important messages that came from the film. But the little things, the strange little things, like the fact that the picture that's on top of the mantle in Shanley Caswell's bedroom, the young lady that plays me in the film, is a white folk art drawing of a cat. I have that hanging in my bedroom right now, and got it when we lived at the farm. They had no idea that I had that picture. They had absolutely no idea. There's no photograph of it anywhere, and yet the set designer managed to choose that one out of who knows how many she had to choose from in order to put a piece of artwork up on the mantel board in the eldest daughter's bedroom.
So it sounds like there are intervening forces also with the production of this film, and I guess some people would call them synchronicities.
Yes.
I mean, look at today. I mean, the 11th. I mean, there's a synchronicity right there. I mean,
I know. It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the thing that's even stranger about it is, later on we'll have George Lopez join us, who is my paranormal partner in crime. I write with him and lecture with him and travel with him and do all kinds of paranormal partying out in the world, getting to know people, my readers, and we're working on a book together, and it's his birthday today.
Yeah.
And we found it, it's like, okay, you turned 8 years old on the day we moved into the farm. I'm sorry, that's just weird. It's reason enough to play the lottery, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I would have to say the biggest I think the biggest question that all of our listeners would have, as well as myself, before I heard you with George Norrie last year on Coast, and it definitely deserves repeating. And the way you explain it is so to the point, and like you said, it's a simple yet a complex answer. how could a family that size, go through 10 years in a situation like that and go that long? There's some. I like the way you explain it, and please explain it because it means very well.
Well, as I've said in the past, there are many reasons why we stayed at the farm. And I'll give you a quick rundown of them in a moment. But what I will tell you is, in retrospect, upon reflection, I have determined personally that whatever it was that catapulted us to the farm, whatever it was that compelled us, whatever it was in the universe that conspired to get us that farm, likewise conspired to keep us there. And in that respect, I feel that it was certainly as much a blessing as a curse. We learned over the course of 10 years how to differentiate and what similarities exist between life and death. From the age of 12 years old, I have known, not believed, but known that there is something beyond our mortal existence. And the way that my mind processed that was, oh, this is good news. This is really good. Not everything that, it's not just ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It is a body vessel that we inhabit as spirit, but that we are all essentially spirit. And I think that there were messages imparted at the farm that it took 30 years to process this information. That is no exaggeration. I didn't pick up a pencil to start to pen these books until 29 and a half years after we left the farm. That's why when James Wan was coming on as the director of the film, he's like, I've followed everything that the Warrens have ever done. I've read every case study of the Warrens. Why did I never hear about this? Why do I not know about the story that they said was the most intense, compelling, disturbing, and significant investigation that they ever conducted? And the reason is because my mother told them no. In 1980, she told them no. But, what I will tell you is that we moved. Mom found the farm in June of 1970. We moved in today, 1971. And from that point on, it was as if we were trapped there. It was as if we were held captive there. And even though we could come and go as we pleased, it was a point of attraction. It was a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse. There was something that pulled us back and pulled us back. My mother, when she realized what was going on, my mother had already had 2 incidents. One of them we never even knew about or saw happen until she didn't tell us about it for a long time afterwards, and she wasn't even sure at first that it was a paranormal experience. She didn't know what paranormal was. She didn't know she didn't know the language to even use around the phenomenon that was occurring at the house. None of us moved into that farm thinking, oh, we could be moving into a haunted house. I was 12. April was 5. We were little stepping stones of kids. Mom was thrilled that we were moving into one of the original colonial homes in the United States. She was all about the history, all about, oh, my God, this is so incredibly important. This place was deeded in 1680. The house as it is now was completed in 1736. This is an original colonial home before the colony of Rhode Island was the state of Rhode Island. It was just an amazing, amazing, beautiful piece of property. Then as soon as we moved in, the economy tanked. People think that, this thing that we just went through, this little hiccup that we went through in 2008 was, I'm not saying it wasn't serious, and shame on the banks and shame on everybody that sabotaged our economy. But I remember sitting in line, pushing the car into a gasoline station, having the number on our license plate determine whether or not we could get gasoline. All of us would go so that in case we ran out while we were sitting in line, we could help our mother push the car in to put gas in, and then you could only buy I think 6 gallons or something like that. I remember the founding of the oil cartel and the embargo and only being able to fly in this country if it was for business. It was crazy. And this house and property that my parents had just invested what was a fortune to them and required, borrowing money from my grandmother and for the down payment. I mean, this was a huge, huge investment for them. A house, a barn, and 200 acres to raise their little children and, live happily ever after. And then for my father to come home from his first business trip away and have my mother show him the bruises on her neck from where she had been brutally beaten with a coat hanger by something that was invisible. He didn't want to believe it. He shunned any belief in this. He was overwhelmed. He felt out of control. I mean, he had a job where he was a salesman. He had a trunk business, and he would fill his car up with jewelry, and he had clients from Quebec to Miami to Ohio. He was all over the place all the time, and these things were happening in the house, and he felt very out of control. And when my father feels fearful, it expresses as anger. And so we learned very quickly not to tell Daddy anything that was going on, and my sisters would come to me and tell me what was going on. There was no way for us to get out of that house. Within a few months, my mother was calling our family attorney, Sam Olafson, saying, Sam, get me out of this house. There's something very bad here. There's something really wrong here. I can't have my children here. We need to go. And he said, Carolyn, there's nothing on the books. There's no statute that says you can get out of, the sale of a home because the house is haunted. There were no disclosure laws on the books. There had only been 2 attempts in the course of Rhode Island history to null and void a sale of a property because of a haunting, and both of them failed and were dismissed. Both times the judge is saying we're not going to rule on something we can't even see. So there was nothing to be done for that. The property value was dropping monthly. The cost of gas, the cost of heating oil, the cost of everything in terms of electricity, everything was skyrocketing in the early 70s. There was incredible political upheaval in the country. It was the beginning of the Watergate scandal. It was, the Nixon thing going on. Vietnam War was raging. The tone and tenor of the mood of this country was about as low as I ever remember it being in my lifetime. And, of course, when my mother said we need to sell the farm, we were all in love with the place. What was happening to her was not happening to us. And even though we had sensations and some weird things, and we'd seen some things as the children, what was happening to her was quite different. But we didn't know about it. And so when Mom said, I want to sell the house, we all said, oh, Mo, no, please, we love it here. We just got here. And when she said to my father, Roger, we need to sell this farm, he's like, that's ridiculous. Nobody, what's the first thing that a prospective buyer is going to say is, you just bought this place. Why are you leaving so quickly? Now, he would have absolutely no part of it. We had no equity in the house. We'd been there for 3, 4, 5 months. And my mother said, we've got to get out, we've got to get out. And the reason that they actually did sell the farm was in the spring of 1979. My mother said to my father, Roger, I won't survive another winter in this house. And he believed her. By that time, he finally believed her. But, their relationship was really severed. Slowly, gradually, it died, it shriveled up, it turned into a very sad state of affairs. Watching my parents separate emotionally and still share a bedroom and still have this pretense of being a married couple, but my mother emotionally had completely turned her back on my father because, for all intents and purposes, he doubted her veracity. And at one point, even so much as went to blame her for what was happening in the house, that somehow she had stirred something up. And the thing that she resented most was the fact that even when he knew beyond the shadow of any doubt what was happening in the house, he still denied it, and he still denied her. And that was really the breaking point in their relationship. But there were a lot of reasons why we stayed at the farm, but the penultimate reason why we stayed at the farm was because we were supposed to. And I truly believe now that it was my destiny, that I knew from a very young age that someday I would tell the story. I asked my mother, and she obliged in purchasing me, and there was no money. When I tell you there was no money for this, my mother went to the Williams 5 and dime and bought me a journal, and then bought me another journal and another, and scrounged up the money somewhere, somehow. My parents invested everything that they had into buying this farm, and to have walked away from it would have put our family in financial ruin. We would have had no place to go, no place for a mother and father to take their 5 little children.
Go ahead, Justin.
It seems like there were two of the oldest females who were tasked with, quite a burden of sorts in this way, with your mother having to kind of keep all this together and keep it to herself, and then you, on the other hand, as well, with ultimately being the confidant for the rest of the siblings, and I imagine for your mother at times, and then also to document this. And so reflecting on that whole process and just carrying all that, how do you ultimately feel about that, besides that it was your destiny, especially going through the process, like say the last 30 years or even 40 years since beginning at the farm on through 1979, etc.? What has that been like emotionally as far as the Odyssey is concerned for you?
Well, it's been extraordinary. And for me, my sister Cindy gets mad when I say this, but I'm saying it anyway. For me, it was the best decade of my life. And the reason that I say that is because what I learned from it, I never had an experience there that was in any way violent to me that I was aware of. Let me put a little addenda on that I was aware of. I was told that some things happened to me, and things were witnessed happening to me there, but I have no recollection of them. So in that respect, I felt unscathed. I felt as though it was my job to be the witness and the observer. I was a very intellectually precocious child. I was reading Emerson and Thoreau, Whitman, Nathaniel Hawthorne. When I was 12 and 13 years old, I was reading the classics. My mother was feeding them to me, one after another after another. I was familiar with Thackeray before I was 10 years old. But this was my mother, who is, I consider her a genius, a true intellectual, but certainly not elitist about it in any way. She's just a brilliant woman. And she made sure that her children were extremely well educated. And being the firstborn, of course, I got an awful lot of access to not only having time to talk with her and for her to bring me to a certain state of consciousness at an early age, but walking into that farmhouse, walking into a full-body apparition within moments of stepping in the door, knowing instantly that something here was very different than it was in Cumberland, and having a sense of that pried wide open my third eye at a very young age. And it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider. I look at this world with wide-eyed wonder. I have always felt like a misfit here, like I just don't belong. I told George, I said, I really think I live on the island of misfit toys. I really do. I think I have a square wheel.
Yeah.
And I felt different, and I felt special, and I felt like I was communicated with in a way that is very hard to describe in words. It's much more an emotion, and that has set me up for my path all through life. I was supposed to tell this story and tell it my way. tell it my way, even though it is a true family memoir. Every single member of the family has their own verbatim words in their experiences somewhere in these 3 volumes. In the third volume, there's a whole chapter that is it's a series of essays written in first person by each one of us, and it's extremely revealing in terms of the mindset of each individual in the family and how we each processed that information differently. I had my moments of epiphany. My mother had her moments. Justin, I think your question is actually brilliant because what it does is it gets to the heart of the matter. And I think where you were going with it was what was the emotional blowback for me as the eldest daughter, being a surrogate parent,
Yes.
needing to step in when my mother was not in a position to parent us the way she would normally.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I did it willingly, I did it lovingly, and I look back on it now, and I see that it made me the individual that I am. And for that, I am grateful. I accepted an enormous amount of responsibility very early in life. And from the moment I got my driver's license, I was the family chauffeur on top of everything else. I was chief cook and bottle washer. I was, I had a part to play in each one of my sisters' lives in a way that most eldest siblings don't have. And in some respects, I feel like I helped raise them, at least for a period of a few years before I went off to college. And every moment that I was away from that farm and away from the spirits and away from my family was misery to me. In the 4 years that I spent 8 months out of every year at college and was only home for 4 months over the summer break and then in January for an extended period every year. And it was blissful for me to be home. I thought that my heart would break and shatter. It fractured our family when my parents sold the farm. It really did. We never lived together under one roof again after that point. Nancy stayed behind as a caretaker on the farm. She refused to leave. She went and cut a special deal with the new owners to stay there while it was being restored to its original colonial splendor. She couldn't bear parting with it. Half of us never wanted to leave. Half of us never wanted to look back. And so it truly did fracture our family. And for those of us who wanted to stay, it's the only place that's ever felt like home to me in my entire life is on that farm. The only place. Every place else has felt like a temporary little way station on my way back home. If the time comes that I am able to purchase the farm, I will. I would like to open it as a center for spiritual and supernatural investigation and study. I think that it's not the kind of place that should just be for 2 people, that it's something to share with the entire world. And however, if it is in my power to make that happen, I will, because it is a truly incredible place. It has an energy unlike any place I've ever been on the planet, and I've been a lot of places. There are 2 people that I know personally who have both been on that property that have had extraordinary experiences, and this might tell you something in terms of the power of the place. Both of them have extraordinary impairments, sensory impairments. One is almost completely deaf, and one is almost completely blind. And when they're on that property, their senses are completely restored.
Oh, wow.
And when they leave, their senses are once again impaired.
Huh. There's one thing I also wanted to make clear to our listeners too. One thing that was portrayed in the film was an exorcism, and as I get it correct, there was never an exorcism performed on that property while you were there, correct? Or while your family was living on the property?
No, I want to thank both of you, you and Justin. I feel that you came to this interview prepared tonight. I do a lot of these, and a lot of times the people who are interviewing me are taking word for word as fact and gospel what they see in a fictionalized film and have not done any homework around the real story here. And the questions that you're asking me, I'm just sitting here going, oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. They're so on their games. Thank you. It really does make it delightful for me to get asked intelligent questions that get right to the heart of the matter. And yes, the heart of the matter is that my mother had perhaps an oppression. I'd say that that's very likely. But I don't believe that my mother was possessed. I know for a fact that the night of the seance, which was portrayed in the film as an exorcism, I know for a fact that my mother was attacked that night because I witnessed it with my own eyes. And my sister Cindy saw it, and my sister April saw what was happening from an alternate perspective from the corner of another room. So it was the most horrific thing I have ever seen in my life. As I said earlier, I don't know how it could even be recreated. But I think that even though the producers of the film knew what had actually happened, they toned it down into what they showed. There was no blood vomitus. There was no, my mother ceased to be my mother for several minutes. She was taken over by something that was, as far as I am concerned, pure, unadulterated evil. I will not call it a demon. I don't know what a demon is. I will tell you that whatever it was not of this earth. It spoke a language that, to my knowledge, does not exist on this earth. I do not know if it was demonic or if it was extraterrestrial or if it was even spirit in nature. I do not know. What I do know is that it had all the power that it could conceivably need to end her life. And we thought that it had. I thought I saw my mother die that night. It was the worst moment of my life. I will never touch a Ouija board. I will never sit at a seance table. I will never interact in that way in regards to anything that has dark arts around it. I have seen the dark side, and I choose to live in the light. I think that is the only prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the way that there was levitation involved, so in terms of that, it was accurate. There was no exorcism. In fact, Ed Warren, there was a priest on the premises, and there was a medium. And as far as I'm concerned, she's the one, the medium. Mary Pastorella is the one who initiated the seance against my father's best judgment. My mother was almost catatonic. She was just shutting down. When they showed up at our house with a caravan of people, my father went ballistic. He didn't want them there in the first place. They didn't tell my mother that they were coming with people. She thought they would be there alone, as they had been in the past. And they didn't tell her because obviously if they had told her, she would have said no. So when they came and introduced my parents to the priest, my father was an altar boy. We weren't godless heathens. We were all born and raised Catholic. We were all baptized. There were confirmations involved here. You know what I mean? This was not, it was represented in the film that, the devout Catholic Warrens as opposed to the paganist heathen parents, and nothing could have been further from the truth. My father was an altar boy for his entire childhood. He was schooled in a Catholic school. He had Catholicism was ingrained in our family. It was at the religious root of our family. However, my father was very testy with the priest, and I know it made me uncomfortable. So as I was overhearing this, and I thought that he was being very rude to a man of God who was trying to explain to him the ancient ritual of seance. And my father didn't want to hear it, and he didn't want it to happen. And Lorraine insisted that it happened and went so far as to say to him that if he was going to try to stop this, that he didn't really love her. I mean, it got very heated.
Wow.
And And after my mother was picked up and tossed 20 feet into the adjacent parlor, and we heard her head hit the floor, and it sounded like her skull had been fractured. It was awful. My father leapt to her side. Ed Warren grabbed his arm to stop him, and my father turned around and cold-cocked that man and took him right to the floor. It was a bloody mess. It was awful.
Now, I have a question for you about that whole evening. You know, as you reflect on that, how everything took place and sort of how it all played out, what was implemented, what was brought in, those dynamics with, say, a seance. Yeah, I'm just considering the ethics, and as far as how you feel about, thinking about how that finally followed through that night and how that night manifested. What do people need to consider as far as inquiry, spiritual, going to potentially conduct a seance or have somebody come in who's a demonologist or whatever that is, and what that can do to a family who's not ready for it maybe, or thinks they might be and might not be?
I consider what happened that night with the medium to be spiritual malpractice. She conjured the spirits. She threw open wide the doors to the other side and invited everyone in. And in a house that was as active as ours, that the activity had been kicked up in because of the presence of the Warrens. That was foolhardy at best. And she, as far as I am concerned, with her actions, jeopardized my mother's life. Whatever it was that had the power to kill my mother chose not to. I really do believe now that having gone over it over and over again with the whole family to make sure that we had it exactly, accurately chronicled, we've really, as a group, come to the conclusion that it could have killed her. It didn't want to kill her. What it wanted to do was make its presence known to the Warrens and to the priest and the medium and the photographers and the audio lady and, everybody else that was there, that it wanted to make its presence known. That seemed to be the compelling factor. We have no idea what it was saying through my mom because it was speaking a language, the voice was not her own, and it was speaking a language that none of us knew or could even identify as something from the planet. And that was about the time when the medium passed out on the table. Right after my mother had been levitated, the table came up first and then slammed down onto the floor so hard. And this was like a 200-pound table. It was rock maple solid. Whoa. And it left 4 marks in the floor where the feet of the table hit the floor, wood floor. It just left an impression behind. They're still there now. They're still in the floor now. But after my mother was levitated and tossed into the other room, the thing that was most amazing about that was that Mom was from point A to point B in less than a fraction of a second. And so to answer your question specifically, what I say to people is please don't. It's not fun and games. There's danger involved with this. Let's face it, I don't know what a demonologist is. I know a few that are seriously into it. John Zaffis, for instance, this man knows his stuff inside and out. If you want somebody who is, there are no experts in the paranormal, obviously. There's so much unknown compared to what is known. I can't, if my family doesn't know the truth of all of this, nobody does. Nobody. And, but as close to expert as you could get are people like John Zaffis, Keith Johnson. Keith Johnson was the first one to come and investigate our house, and he's the one that told the Warrens about the house. My mother never went looking for anybody. She didn't even know how to describe what was happening or what it was. But through a very bizarre series of events, Keith Johnson showed up at our door. He was only 19 years old at the time. but he already came with a great deal of information under his belt about he had grown up in an environment very similar to our own, and he had an experience as soon as he went upstairs. All hell broke loose in that house. He was acknowledged by the spirits as somebody that posed a threat to them, at least one of them. So it was, I look back on it now, and I have to say, we were in danger.
Yeah.
There were things that happened in that house that could have gone another way.
Yeah.
And when people ask me, do you do seances? Would you like to attend a seance? Would you? Absolutely not. The thing is, here's the bottom line. The veil is the illusion. There is no veil between dimensions. We live in a multidimensional universe, and some of us are capable of seeing what's going on through either exposure or overexposure, or we're born with a certain little click in our DNA that allows us to tune in and tap in. Why did 4 little girls see Johnny Arnold standing in the corner of the dining room, but my father did not?
Mm-hmm.
Because he wasn't on that frequency. Children have wide-eyed wonder.
Got another call. I'm assuming this would be George.
Oh, great! Is it 8:00 already?
He's,
oh, excellent.
Almost. Almost that. Who's calling in this evening? Who's our next one? Let's see. Is this George?
I am early. If you want, I could sit here and wait.
Oh, it's not a problem. Not a problem. We're
No,
about
you know
ready
what?
to,
I'll tell you why I called in. George, tell me if I'm wrong. The reason he called in is because he heard me get off track, and he was going to try to rein me back in. It's what he does so effectively.
Right
I
on.
probably didn't answer that question thoroughly, and he was going to just rein me in and get me right back on track. He does it every week on our show.
Happy birthday, George. How you doing?
Doing wonderful, wonderful. How's everybody doing? And very, very happy New Year to you, Doctor.
Very good, very good. Orlando is probably the warmest place right now in the country, so I can't complain.
I agree.
I'm sorry, Andrea, for that, but it gives you the opportunity to think about whether you want to move further south or not.
Well, that decision has already been made.
Yeah.
Because George is down in Florida, yes, and my mother wants me to move her to Florida. She's tired of being cold. She's 75, and she's over it. And, we were in the teens and single digits in the last week in Atlanta. So apparently I need to go further south.
Right on. But
about a week ago, even as Floridians, I think I wanted to move close to the equator, because even last week it was a little cold for us.
Now, George, remember about that. You need to be careful about that, because you keep posting these things about having to put socks on and stuff, and you're really aggravating our New England friends.
Yeah, well, living in Fort Lauderdale, that's one thing I wanted to bring to you, George, is actually I went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale as well, and I remember living down there for the couple years. I was in animation and film all year round. Even in the wintertime, I wore sandals and socks. So, and that's all I wore.
Sure. Oh, yeah. And I used to hate that parking off 17th Street Causeway. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. That was the worst. I used to park across the street at the gym.
Both he and I attended, maybe at the same time, Fort Lauderdale Art Institute, mine for commercial advertising. He went for, again, video and computer.
Yeah. Computer animation and film. I kind of merged the two. So
A great non-accredited school.
Oh, man. Yeah. It was, I kind of left early because I ran out of money and just decided to change it up, get into photography and whatnot. But when it comes to the paranormal, I've been a researcher, avid researcher, and had interest in the paranormal ever since I was a child. Ever since I could remember being conscious of life itself, I've always had experienced things I could not explain, thinking they were normal, but then realizing that nobody else is experiencing this stuff. So, yeah, probably for the last 25 to 30 years, I've been really, really deep into it and continuous research, and now it seems like I've been put on a path and helped onto a path cosmically from the other side to try to get some answers, so to speak, and do some more research for the rest of mankind, so to speak, get some understanding for everybody. So, and that's why I decided to start this radio show and try to get to the science of it, the quantum physics at the quantum level, and bring the consciousness, to it and whatnot. But I definitely want to get your take on it, George, as far as giving us a little bit of a history of when you first got into it, how we got to where you are now.
My story is probably the most bizarre. It's the antithesis of almost everybody else that's had experiences and then wanted answers. I didn't have experiences. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what was the reason why others had homes. And we grew up, I think, where we had things go on strange in the house, but they're explained away, and you never really kind of focused in on it. But it was never anything that was so substantially impacting, such as a full body apparition or things hovering through the room. Although my mother did throw a lot of things at us kids when we were younger because we were so bad. But the hardest part for me was where to begin, and it wasn't until I'd moved from South Florida to Central Florida, and there was people that I worked with who told me that St. Augustine was 30 minutes away, and I said, Andrea knows I'm geographically challenged, and I thought that I'm on the East Coast. I'm just north of Daytona Beach, and I thought that St. Augustine was just north of Tampa. So as soon as I was informed how off I was, I went and took a visit, and I fell in love with this incredible city, the oldest plated city in the country back in 1565, I believe. And so started going up there and beginning to investigate, starting to invest in equipment. This is probably a little over a decade ago, but again, I was starting it off on my own. And then I got into the conference scene. I needed and wanted, if I'm going to do this, I needed to do this with people who've been doing this longer than I had. So I began going to many of the Darkness radio events that were going on at the time, going out to the Stanley Hotel and Eastern State Penitentiary, Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and it just built from there. I went to Adam Bly's lectures, John Zaffis' lectures, Mark and Debbie Constantino's, the investigators that have been TV for many, many years and the ones who've never been on TV, and just learn every nuance of this community before I would even begin to take the next step, which was to work in the field of residential. And that was, I think, for me, the most painstaking life lesson, working with, as many people say in this field, the scariest part of investigating the dead is the living. You learn so much about people and what their phobias are, what their fears are, what their hopes are and dreams are. Sometimes the hopes and dreams of wanting to be possessed or wanting to be infested with some sort of a haunting. And I did scores and scores of those with my team, Port Orange Paranormal Society, before I decided to make that team defunct and stop doing residential and focus more on the show that I started probably about 7 years ago now. See, I bought my home about 8 years ago. So, yeah, 7.5 years ago I started the show. And been focusing on trying to excel this community, same as you've been doing also, PG, because the important part to it is getting the message out there. And as much as you could door-to-door sell this field and try to educate your clients, it's better because the majority of those clients were also big fans of the paranormal shows, to do it from a forum with a lot of the people I went and saw the conferences do, which was to, group educate and group inform about this community. And I've never looked back. I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. Yeah, and we had a church service, some sort this morning, and we had a woman that was speaking. She's a medium, and she I was about ready to kind of interject with her little speech and whatnot, but afterwards I told her, I was like, all the clients, most of all the investigations, pretty much every investigation I've done thus far is client based. I'm getting a call from somebody who is experiencing something paranormal in nature. And majority of the time, pretty much, I'd say probably 98% of the time, it's an internal problem. It's something stemmed from the psyche of the individual and whatnot that's causing the issue. Not to discount that there's not spirit involved. There's always spirit involved because we're essentially spirit. But there's always something on the other side that is feeding off of it, and then it's turning it into another energetic body that we're there to kind of find out what's really going on and helping them counseling, so to speak.
It's an important part. I think it's a baptism by fire for any investigator doing the residential cases. The scary part is most of them, again, begin their journey with the baptism by fire, and it's scary because you are dealing with the living human beings who have psychological issues in some cases, and you could just ever so simply encourage more of this kind of behavior within that individual, or damage it even more, depending upon the investigator going in. There has to be some sort of a background or a grounding foundation before you even begin doing residential cases, but too many jump right into it, and pretty much when these teams get in there, and they automatically have a honorary demonologist, not with any training, just to simply say, I think I want to take this position. It's like, I think I want to play third base this year on the baseball team. Yeah. Have you ever played third base before? No, but I like the angle. I get better sun this way. It's the game right now of a crapshoot, because anybody could walk in, and because they want to get involved with that case, they want to say, yeah, I feel something dark and sinister here. Now you're playing on the psyche of an individual, especially if it's a young mother who lives alone, or somebody who's elderly, who's no longer has her family around her. That's hard to just walk out the door after 4 or 5 hours and say, have a great night. We'll work on the evidence to see whether or not there is actually a demon living in your home. It's a very, very dangerous game to play with. It really is. And so getting the information out there to the community first is important, and then educating anybody else who wants to listen with what you're doing with the show and what I do with the show, and Andrew and I do on Tuesday nights with the World Awakening, is very, very important to try and get more of a pinpoint of where do we begin with this and how do we continue on. And that's where I changed and got out of residential, because it is a crapshoot, and when we're still dealing with 3 important words in this community, which is I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you have. I don't know what we're talking to. I don't know what we captured. And when you're doing the EVPs, you're coming back with your opinion of what you think you're hearing, usually. Mm-hmm. So you're leaving yourself open to a lot of interpretation in this community. That's why I went back to a lot of these historically haunted locations where there's reputed to be consistent activity, because I believe that the consistency of this field is the key ingredient. I think that's what's going to unlock the mysteries for us. And as soon as we can start working cohesively as a community and start working such as a Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, for an example, or the Seven Sisters in Ocala that we're going to, I think the important part is to try and find out if we can predict primarily what those residual events are and when they happen and why they happen. And I think that'll lead us through the next doors, VG. I think it'll lead us through intelligent hauntings. It'll lead us through human intent, what things are that we are creating without even being aware of it. So there's a lot involved with this yet. And again, for myself, just over a decade, for yourself, 25, 30 years doing this, with the exception of technology, how much further have we truly gotten?
Yeah. How often do you bring in a medium to work with you on cases?
Do you really want to go down that road?
George, you know what? I think that is an important road to go down, and I really think that you should tell them exactly what you think about that, and then talk about some of the spirit box sessions that we've had, especially pertaining to the farm.
Yeah.
The mediums, I think, in this field are an essential piece of equipment, no different than dowsing rods, no different than an EMF meter. It's a great starting point. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it's just subject to interpretation just as much. Now, there are mediums out there that investigators have used and said that they are pinpoint accurate on so many different things. Yeah. my problem through this situation is that, and I've got friends that are mediums. I've got friends that I've known for a long time that are mediums, and we get into this very serious debate, this very serious argument. And you're going to kind of laugh because I think that you know what I'm about to say also, because I think it's right on point, is that when I've had mediums say, there's someone right here, right now, and they're talking to me about this relative of yours or this friend of yours, or they're telling me about an event that's about to unfold, and I would start this dialogue with the medium and say, you're talking to them right now. You can hear them? Can you see them? Yeah. No, they're showing me images, but they're here right now. Yes. Okay, I'm going to stand up the side of my pack of cigarettes. I'm going to stand it on edge. I want you to ask them if they could knock that over. Well, they don't do that. That's not how this works. Yeah. I said, what do you mean? Well, they're not here to perform for you. They're not here to put on a circus for you. I said, no, I'm not asking for a performance. I'm asking for validation. Right now, the only thing I have going on is what you're saying. What I would like is to be able to see if there is actual spirit intent here, if the spirit is here, and if I believe what is true to be the collective consciousness, that they can interconnect with any spirit at any time instantaneously. If they don't have the will and ability to be able to knock this pack of cigarettes over or move a pencil or slide a paper off a table, there's someone else, I'm sure, or some other spirit that can do that for them. Have them come forward. Well, it's not the way it works. And this is a consistent circle, vicious cycle that we deal with mediumship that I want to work more with. And in answer to your question, do I work with mediums? I have in the past. They've done wonderful for residential cases to make the client feel much more at ease.
Yeah.
But as far as the proof, the consistency, that's a concern that I've not seen yet, and then that's something that I want to work towards with mediums in the future, mediums who are credible and would say, yes, I'd like to experiment with this. I've even heard stories, not to be a little elongated here with this, but investigators who have been out there and had mediums with them at the historically haunted locations and set up equipment and said, well, this flashlight went on, which it's a whole nother debate. We could talk about flashlights. Or the EMF meter went off when she asked it to, or this went off. We also have to consider human intent. How much capability from a subconscious standpoint does this medium have also to create manifestations on this equipment? Yeah. That there's a lot to cover yet. There's so much ground yet that we're just going on blind faith in this field. That needs to be concrete science. And
even the power of intent from the investigators. When you get down to the principle of metaphysics and the power of our own consciousness, just by thought, depending, if we want something to happen, you think about it and then you put a lot of enough feeling into it, you're going to make something happen.
Power of prayer.
Yep.
Same principle
that's the
concept.
Power of focused energy. I mean, George and I have had Robert Murch on our show on A World Awakening and have gotten deep into discussions regarding Ouija boards. He's, one of the world's leading authorities on the subject, certainly in terms of its history. And we've talked about this and about focused energy. And one of the points that George made during that very compelling episode of the show was that we could put an orange in the middle of a table and put 6 people around it and focus all of that psychic, kinetic, psychological, and emotional energy and make that orange move in much the same way that a little piece of plastic will move around a Ouija board. That the point being that it is not just what interaction might be occurring because of this, but also because of the focused energy that's placed into it and what that can manifest in its own regard.
Yeah. You have anything, Justin?
Well, Andrea, I just wanted to, recap on how the females in the household back there in the 70s, initially that first day, saw the gentleman, and yet your father didn't, and yet he was standing right there. So, here we go again, who's aware and who's attuned to it and whatnot versus the other side.
Well, Justin, I understand what you're asking. I don't think it really is as much a matter of, although I think it factors into the equation, I think that women are generally more open, more intuitive. It's just that we use our powers more, I guess, than men do in general. And I do hate to generalize because, it's not always the case, certainly. But for the most part, I think my father wasn't on that wavelength. My father wasn't thinking in terms of that. And I think that the real deciding factor in that particular event that day was that my father was an adult and we were children. And I think that it was not so much about the sex of the child as it was the age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Openness. I think kids are very vulnerable and also very extremely perceptive. And, you know, think about being a child and everything that you see for years and years of your life. Virtually everything that you see is new. You know, this is something I've never experienced before. This is something I've never seen before. This is something I need to learn about. This is, you know, it's just as you assimilate your environment in your life, you see things on television, you hear things on the radio, every new person that you meet, you learn to socially interact, et cetera, et cetera. Children are open to the universe.
Yes.
And it's the adults in their lives that try to tamp that down, try to minimize that. How many children have walked out of their rooms over the course of history and said, Grandma read me a bedtime story last night, and mother or father says, oh, no, honey, that's not possible. Grandma died before you were born. It must have been a dream. It must be your imagination. They start giving this child this litany of reasons why that could not have happened, why that was not true, when chances are really good that Grandma read that child a bedtime story.
That's right. We start getting into, you know, these other quests as we're adults and we've been conditioned, and we have all these filters due to the shoulds and the judgments, and then we start trying to get back to, if we're doing our work anyway, something to the effect of what some folks call beginner's mind.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What? So, are there any new projects that you and George are working on? Or are there, new campaigns out there, new projects, new investigations, collaborating on a book or whatnot? What's happening?
We are collaborating on a book that we cannot really tell you anything about, because if we tell you anything about it, we tell you everything about it. And
well,
so
I don't know
we're
nothing
keeping
about
that
it.
pretty hush-hush
What book?
right now. But at a later time, we will definitely revisit this with you once it's out in publication, which should happen within the next several months. However, one thing I wanted George to address is what's going on with what we have done in the past and what we intend to pursue in the future in regard to his work with the Spirit Box, because I just don't think that there's anybody that has a more sophisticated methodology and is seeking consistent contact in a way that George is. And I would really like for him to speak to that and talk some about our experiences with sessions that we did in Rhode Island over the summer.
Oh, definitely. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, it's been a wild 2014 of adding to discovery already with this particular device, which I think is, again, the starter kit for what is to come with this community as the technology continues to advance and is tweaked to what is supposed to be used for this field and not what is supposedly used for this field. There's a difference between it. And I think what's happening right now is, people are going out and picking up items from Best Buy and items from Home Depot and saying that this could possibly work, and I've been guilty of it myself in the past, but we're not sure what we're doing. So maybe that's the way to go. Maybe somebody's going to find something at the electronics store, and it's going to be the miracle piece of equipment. And the Spirit Box, to me at this point in time, has been the closest thing to it. The problem with the equipment or the usage of equipment up to now had not been used efficiently. And what I mean by efficiently is, again, no different than the obelisk, which is speculation. You get this voice that sounds like Stephen Hawking's coming across, saying words like upstairs, knife, girl, and then you're there to fill in the gaps. Well, there must have been a girl who was murdered by a knife upstairs, and it's, again, subject to speculation. So we couldn't go with this route, but unfortunately, for those who don't know what a Spirit Box is, it's a radio frequency or radio receiver that plays both AM and FM usually and scans up and down the broadband. Now, the devices basically stop it from, like on your car, you press scan, it stops on a strong signal. That particular part of the device has been removed, so it continues to scan all the way through the frequency, and it starts at the bottom and continues to go up again. The premise behind it is twofold, like two trains that are running down two different rails next to each other. One is the actual radio frequencies that are picked up, and it's believed that the spirits are precognizant, and they could pick out the words that they want, usually monosyllabic or two-syllable words, yes, no, maybe, things of that sort that you're asking questions of. And then the second one, the second train, would be the white noise, which is what we try to focus on more because some of the answers are coming across 7 or 8 or 9 bands, or even more bands sometimes, depending, but it's the same voice coming across. So we focus on that. But the important part is what people are tending to do now is turn on a spirit box and they'll ask, how many spirits are here? And you get the number 7. Well, it could be the time, it could be the score of a game, it could be the number of people killed in an accident. Or they'll say, can you tell us the name of the spirit that's here? And you hear Tom. Or it could be the radio DJ. It could be there's a multitude or myriad of different things that you can put into that storyline. Unless and until we look at consistency, which is what I've been trying to do, we will still go down the scope of speculation. And this is why I started going into two different things, which are trigger words and redundant responses. Trigger words being something that you would not normally hear off the radio bands, such as your name, the location that you're at, or even very difficult words such as metaphysics or parapsychology. You ask the spirits to give you those words. You get into a more specificity of what you want them to say. It gives it more of a definitive answer that you're communicating with the spirits rather than just pure conjecture. The redundant response simply is that. You ask them to repeat those words over and over again or those answers, and then you can combine them both. Could you tell me how many spirits are here? I need you to say the word metaphysics and the number of spirits after over and over again. And this is where we've got more of validity, and with many of the people, the hierarchy of this community, that we've gotten a chance to become very, very close friends with, who have either joined in on these events or have been sent clips of it, have been astonished to the results. So it's working very, very well right now, and a lot of different teams out there have begun to adopt this and work in conjunction with this, and hopefully it'll continue to, the word will continue to spread and more people will use it. And last summer, we went to the Ocean State Paracon in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where the farmhouse is located that Andrea and her family lived in the 1970s. Yeah. Ken DeCosta Rise of Paranormal had a phenomenal event there that was charity-based, and everybody volunteered their time, and it was a great time. But we had an opportunity to go to Bathsheba's gravesite. We had an opportunity to go to Ed Warren's gravesite along with John Zaffis and do spirit box sessions at both locations. Some of the results, not all of them, because some of them were personal when it came to Mr. Zaffis and Mr. Warren, that I've only shared with him, but his astonishment to some of the things that I sent him that said, John, I don't know what this means, but here, I'd send you the clip. And he'd come back with, oh, my God, I can't believe that you would even know this, or there's no way you would know this. But he would validate that it was Ed's voice. He knew it was Ed's voice. No different than Andrea would be able to validate with her experiences with Bathsheba that this was Bathsheba's spirit communicating with us. Yeah. But the videos that we posted on the World Awakening YouTube page give some indication of what it is that I'm talking about and how we do this procedure. And we're going to continue to press forward, and hopefully the technology, which is in reverse now, the technology will catch up to the technique versus the other way around, where we've always our techniques try to catch up to the technology. We're now looking for something that is more of a white noise generator without having to use the radio frequencies, so we can definitively guarantee that this conversation is going on between spirit and human.
I think that it really is a matter of tapping into the right and correct frequency. But there is no question in my mind, none, that we have had consistent contact. I have done, I think, 4 or 5 spirit box sessions with George in total now that we have had communication with spirits from the farm, voices that I recognized, answering questions, very specific questions, and doing it in a cohesive manner. In fact, there were a couple of times that it got crowded. It literally got crowded, and George had to tell them to please back off and let the one spirit that I was trying to communicate with come through. But of all of the experiences that we've had, the one that was most stunning to me, the one that was most provocative, to me was when we were at Penhurst Asylum in Pennsylvania last April, and George put the spirit box in the middle of a room. There had to be at least a dozen people in the room, and he introduced me to the spirits and said, do you know what film is about this woman's family, Andrea's family? And immediately, as if it were a disembodied voice, came through the spirit box, The Conjuring. And
Wow.
for myself, to me, that the implications of that are absolutely staggering. It indicates to me that they have access to all knowledge, everything that's going on in our lives.
It's like the Akashic record, so to speak.
Say that again?
Like the Akashic records, the all-knowing, the universal library.
Right, that they are part now of the collective consciousness, and so are privy to all thoughts, to all experiences, to all awareness. For them to know that a film was made about our story is really an amazing, compelling notion.
Wow, that part when. Yeah, it just gave me chills. I just, sat here. I'm like, wow, okay, amazing.
I was very skeptical about the spirit box at first, to tell you the truth. I remember the first time George and I did it at his house in Florida, in the backyard. He doesn't allow any sessions in the house, so we were outside, and I remember I wouldn't even use the word skeptical. I was very curious. I wanted to know if there was any semblance of reality to this, if this was just wishful thinking or hocus pocus, or what was this? And within 15 or 20 minutes after the questions were flowing, and George is standing there saying, tag that, because he uses it for review. And, after the fact goes through, and so he's listening for specific answers to the questions. It wasn't a situation that required review. They were that clear in terms of their responses. But again, let me reiterate what George said a few minutes ago. We don't know exactly who we're talking to.
Yeah.
I'd like to address that also because, say, for instance, a seance, the seance that occurred in your family's home versus talking to spirits through a spirit box as such, and being open to whatever's going to come through. What sorts of protection and protocols do you have in place, George and Andrea, these days for spiritual safety as such compared to, say, what happened to your mother, Andrea, during that night?
Well, I don't consider the spirit box dabbling in the dark arts. I consider the spirit box science. And even though it's considered pseudoscience, all science that is now accepted was at one time pseudoscience. So I say full steam ahead in terms of the research. I don't have any qualms at all about doing spirit box sessions at all. In fact, I welcome it. In fact, I've gotten my own. A good friend of ours has gotten one for me and tweaked it, and hopefully it'll be here before I head south to Florida so that George can get me up to snuff and I can begin my own research and my own work. I don't even know where the confidence came other than the fact that he has trained me over the last year or so, really is in an apprentice position to learn properly how to be an investigator instead of a client. And I want that. Justin, I particularly want that because I believe that there is some point of continuity, cohesiveness, and clarity to be found in a multidimensional situation that exists on this planet. We think of ourselves as living on a three-dimensional, five-sensory planet, but I don't believe that that's the truth of it. And the spirit box is a tool to make that connection in a more profound way instead of the just catch-as-catch-can moments. This is an actual deliberate connection being made, and I think that it has much to teach us. So in terms of that, it is the most important work that I have ever done, and I am completely open to the methodology, to the process, to the practice that George has instilled in me. But it was interesting because, just a little aside, when we went to Bathsheba Sherman's gravestone this past July in Harrisville, we were there with the likes of Joe Chin was there and Ken DaCosta, and we had, people like John Zaffis was there with us, and Keith Johnson was, we had people who are at the top of their field and have great insight and understanding to what's going on. And when we got there, our spirit box disappeared. George's box disappeared. We tore apart an SUV looking for it, and it had just been in his hand moments before. I think we had to drive 800 yards from the theater where the event was to the actual cemetery in downtown Harrisville in the village. It's right in the center of the village. And we could not find that spirit box, and everyone present was looking for it.
Little apportation.
Everyone pitched in. And all of a sudden, we turned, and I said, George, there it is. And it was wedged between two iron spikes on the cemetery, the wall, the fencing in front of her gravestone. And the thing that happened there that was so interesting is George just looked at me, and I looked at George, and he said, let's just move on. We're not even going to ask about this.
This is great. This is great stuff, though. I mean, this is apportation now, so you have physical manifestations here along with a spirit box here.
Yes, and my father was there, and several of the people who were present saw very dark figures hovering around my father, and even basically told him to step out and away from Bathsheba's gravestone for what was in his own best interest, because my father didn't have any way of protecting himself. He didn't know what he was walking into there, in much the same way he didn't know what he was walking into at the farm, in much the same way that the Warrens didn't realize that they were in over their heads the moment it began. They just didn't have any clarity about that. But George is a very spiritually centered person, and I am a very spiritually centered person, and I can't speak to what he does in terms of protection. But all I know is that I feel completely, utterly protected all the time. And I need to be, because I'm a magnet for spiritual activity, and I have been since childhood. So ever since we moved there, all bets were off, and I was in pretty much constant communication, and most of it being telepathic, some of it being actual physical manifestations. So I know how to protect myself, and I don't feel, let me put it to you this way, I do not perceive a threat. Bathsheba Sherman was woefully misrepresented in The Conjuring, in the film.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you for clarifying this.
It was really what they did. And now, again, this was based on Mrs. Warren's say-so. This is a woman that walked into our house in October, the night before Halloween, in 1973, and walked directly over to our black stove in the kitchen and put her hand on it, covered her eyes, and said, I sense a malignant presence in this house. Her name is Bathsheba. Well, all due credit to her. She had no idea who the entities were in that house. She knew nothing of the historical background or who was affiliated with the place or what could have happened there. This was her impression, and she pulled that name right out of the ether.
Wow.
However, the other side of that coin, when you flip it over, is that she blamed everything on Bathsheba from that point on. And we are pretty certain that she is not the one that was haunting and taunting my mother. And it wasn't that she was the most pleasant of the spirits in the house, certainly not. But we're absolutely sure that she's not the one that was threatening my mom, that she's not the one that was, taunting her with fire and causing the spirit in the house that appeared in full-body apparition had an obviously broken neck. And Bathsheba died in 1885, and she died of paralysis. It was written right in the notes of her death certificate, handwritten by the doctor who examined the corpse. And it says, I've seen it, I've held it in my own hands, and it says, it is as if her body had turned to stone. Wow. So, who's to say? We don't know for certain, but I do know that the incantation that was uttered in threat to my mother to leave that house was in English that was archaic by the time Bathsheba Sherman lived and died. She was born in 1812 and died in 1885. And this language was from the 1700s. 'Twas mistress once afore ye came, and mistress here will be anon. will drive ye out with fiery broom, will drive ye mad with death and gloom. This is what was said to my mother, and that was language that was archaic in the 1800s.
Yes. So
Anyway, I just wanted to tell you, let me just finish up real quick here. So we start doing, George begins the spirit box session at Bathsheba's gravestone, and he starts asking her, you know, the old ritual, especially, I think it started in New England, about putting coins on the top of gravestones to give spirits, you know, something to spend on the other side, or I don't know, get just for good luck, whatever. But there were a series of coins on the gravestone, and he asked very specific questions. 3 of her 4 children died before they were 4 years old. Only one of them survived her. Herbert survived her, and he started asking specific questions about the names of her children, the number of coins that were on their gravestones, the number of coins that was on her gravestone, and she was answering. And at first I think, George, she started to throw my voice again, and you told her not to, that she had to speak in her own voice, which sounds almost a little girlish. It's almost affected childlike in her voice. And he asked her to not only count, but to denote the different denominations of coins that were on her gravestone. And not only did she do that, but she came up with the number 11 for the coins, and we could only count 10. And it turned out that I had leaned on the gravestone, and one of the pennies was stuck to my arm. And we have that, George. I don't know where George has that clip out in cyberspace, but it is out there for anybody to listen to. In fact, there were several of them that he put out, I believe, on our World Awakening page is where people can find them, or our YouTube page for a World Awakening. But they're out there, and, you know, we invite everybody to come and listen to this process, because really this is the scientific method. This is what needs to happen in order for this field to move forward. Let's face it, this field is completely stagnant. There are no new discoveries. There's nothing coming forward that's any different than what we've been doing for decades, other than the change in the sophistication of the electronic equipment. And now we're at a point, as George said earlier, about bringing the equipment up to the method, bringing the equipment in to such an extent that we can tap in. Can you think of how revolutionary it would be to have a machine on the market that people could contact their dead loved ones at will? And what a revolution that would cause worldwide to the global community. There would be no question anymore in anyone's mind whether or not the spiritual realm exists. The question would be, how fast can I get one of those machines?
Yeah, like Thomas Edison. I mean, there's never been any proof that Thomas Edison had actually built the device, but he had proclaimed that he had the blueprints and whatnot of a machine that he can speak to the other side.
That's that was the foundation of Edison's research, and everything else that we consider now just a normal part of life that he invented all came from that research. That's where his interest originally was in paranormal.
Yeah. Wow. And later on in the show, I guess the last hour, Maria is going to be calling in to touch point on the event in Ocala on the 24th of this month, and maybe we can give a little bit of an idea on what you guys, George, John, and everybody else are planning to. I mean, you don't have to give any secrets away or whatnot, but anything that you feel that our listeners might want to know about that are going to be attending to, get a really good idea on what might be happening.
Well, I know George is going to be master of ceremonies, and I do believe that there will be some ongoing investigation. Nobody runs an investigation more professionally than he does. So that alone should be a draw. There's also going to be some events in the theater, the local theater. I'm very much looking forward to this. I think this is going to be an extraordinary event, and it couldn't happen at a better time of year when people are able to just escape the frozen tundra and come to the balmy south. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And Maria is absolutely delightful. In fact, she's the one that turned me on to you. and I'm very much appreciative of that. Great connections being made. But you do realize, of course, that we're all coming together with purpose and reason.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure
you
understand that.
Yeah, and I this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for a couple individuals, such as Maria being one of them, and before her, one of the reverends that I've been working with through one of the spiritualist churches in Orlando. He's been one of my, I'd say, mentors and whatnot. And when he first told me about the premiere, everything started coming together almost immediately after that. Went up to the Seven Sisters Inn, met Maria this past Halloween, and since then everything has just blew out of proportion. It just like an atom bomb just went off. I mean, when I created Claremont Paranormal a year ago this past Halloween, everything that's happened since then, and I've had some weird confirmations from, I'm assuming, from the other side through seances and through some other mediums and stuff like that, I got a message from you from the other side that, some specific information that, I've been led in this direction to help guide other people and donate something to this community. And I definitely feel that this is just the start of what's going to be happening this month on the 24th, or the weekend of the 24th, and I hope it becomes much, much bigger next year, and bigger and bigger and bigger, and maybe end up being a World's Fair, so to speak, of the paranormal.
That would be delightful. It really would. The thing is that as we go through this process and we learn day to day, week to week, whether it be through exposure that we welcome or whether it be through exposure that we didn't necessarily invite, it is clear to me that there is heightened sense of awareness going on. It's the reason why George and I do a World Awakening, and the double entendre is there deliberately, because it is a world waking up to the fact that we are essentially spiritual beings having a human experience, that there's not very much difference between those that we've loved and have passed on and ourselves. They're just a transmutation and a transformation of energy, but they still retain their characteristics and they still retain their ability to connect with us. It's really a question of how open are we? What are we willing to see? People ask me all the time, how do you communicate with spirit? How do you make that happen? I so want to talk to my mother. I miss my dad. I need to have an experience. It's so important to me. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And my answer is uniform. Ask.
Yep.
Talk to them. Just talk to them. You will absolutely, definitively receive a message. There will be no mistaking it for anything or anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask. Once you open wide the door to spirit, it can't be closed again. You can turn your back on it, but that's it.
Yeah.
It's open. Once you have, as I said earlier in the show, once your mind expands, it's not capable of retracting. And if you're brave enough and you're willing enough and you're able to dispel the fear around the supernatural is just as natural as the natural.
Yeah. I don't like the use of the word supernatural. Everything is natural. It's everything that happens in the universe is according to natural law. There's nothing
That's
miraculous
exactly right.
or super anything. It's all got a purpose and is all within.
That's right.
Within natural law. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's all within the same realm. If everything is one thing, then it is all within the same realm.
Yeah, everything is one thing manifesting itself in many different forms and attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. Well,
Yeah.
George, one thing that George didn't mention that I would like to bring up, earlier in the conversation he said something about not having had any experiences prior to embarking upon his role as an investigator, learning to be a good and proper and thorough investigator. But he has had some experiences after the fact, and one of the things that has touched my life is that he lost a team member who he now routinely relies upon to help him open that door and keep it open during sessions, spirit box sessions. And she is very reliable. She is. And, I don't know if George, if you want to talk about that, but one thing that we had touched upon earlier was the need or lack of need for a medium to be present in investigation. And what I would like to spend a little time talking about are our spirit guides, as we denote them, and what role they play in our lives. I know for a fact that when I am in any kind of trouble, when I am in any kind of need, all I need to do is ask, and there is some benevolent power, some force that comes to my aid, and it's not occasional, it's all the time. And that's one of the most important things that I learned at the farm. When we were in crises, all we had to do was ask for help and mean it, and it would come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
George, do you want to speak about your wonderful guides?
No.
He's just being too sneaky. That's all.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, at the Paranormal Reality event, Seven Sisters Inn at the historical Marion Theater on Saturday night, when we are presenting all of the paranormal stars that are going to be attending and involved in the investigations, Maria had asked me quite some time ago, in just a happenstance during a conversation, there was one of the most profound EVPs I'd ever captured. Again, having crisscrossed this country so many times, having the privilege to go to some of the most historically haunted locations and capture some fantastic evidence, I still fall back to this particular one, and it was, as Andrea said, one of my team members had been tragically taken from us at a very young age of 23 in a car accident, and almost immediately began to visit and communicate. But third day in to her passing, she came back with a friend of hers, and only by identification from people who knew him, because I did not know who this deep male voice was, and people identified him as Gabe, friend of Amanda's who had passed 2 years earlier. And I equated that, especially trying to comfort Amanda's mother in regards to her passing, obviously, and then the contact communication, which she so dearly was hoping to make that happen. I told her that it was kind of like Amanda going off to college, and Gabe was 2 years senior and was showing her around, kind of a mentor. And he showed up at my house on this third night, and before they had left, after communicating, he said the most incredible, profound 3 words that I think every paranormal investigator should have as their creed. And those 3 words were, "Don't forget us." And now Maria and I had a conversation about that EVP, and she said, I must have that as part of the intro to the presentation at the Marion Theater. So I sent her a small snippet, kind of a mini movie that included the story, very, very quick, Reader's Digest version of what happened with Amanda and the communication after, and then that particular EVP. So that will be played at the Marion Theater on Saturday night. As far as spirit guides, guardian angels, Colette has been the one that I've been told by mediums is my guardian angel or my spirit guide. I feel surrounded by several. Many a time, again, only through the communication can I validate that. I do stay open-minded. I do keep an open dialogue. I do speak aloud to all of them, as well as my relatives and friends who have passed, and just speak directly to them. And, of course, it's all privy to your own opinions as to whether or not the contact's being made. I've had far too many validations. I got one quick story that may be of interest to your listeners, PG. If you'll indulge me, if you'd like me to tell the story before John comes on the top of the hour.
Definitely. We got about 10 minutes before John chimes in.
10 minutes? Oh, I can kill this in an hour. No big deal. The strangest thing that was upcoming for me was, and again, one of the best pieces of visual evidence, my own personal experiences, was at Rolling Hills Asylum in East Bethany, New York. Been very good friends with Sharon Coyle. As a matter of fact, we were the first team to investigate Rolling Hills Asylum after Sharon Coral's purchase. And that she had invited me back for an event she called ParaQuest about two and a half years ago. And just, a week before I was leaving, and Amanda had been an integral part of a dual spirit box session we had done with Rolling Hills that presented some of the most compelling evidence to date. It was incredible stuff that we were capturing. I had been driving to work about a week before leaving for East Bethany, New York, for Rolling Hills. And on my way in the car, I said to Amanda, if at all possible, and let me correct myself, it was actually 3 days prior to me flying out. It was a Wednesday night. And I said, I need to know if you're going to be able to make it to Rolling Hills Asylum while I'm up there assisting during spirit box sessions. If you, Colette, Michael, and Gabriel, Michael being Saint Michael, that we're assuming, again, we're not sure, but we always seem to have protection during these spirit box sessions. And I had simply said, I need a profound message to let me know that you're going to be arriving. Now, I live in, again, the area just north of Daytona Beach, and it's roughly about a 40-minute drive there, a 40-minute drive home. And I've been doing this for, again, about 8 years driving back and forth that particular drive. Turned back the clock to the night that Amanda had passed. It was on a lonely road. Her car had flipped. The roof of the vehicle hit a tree, and she had snapped her neck and passed away. The Florida Highway Patrol just made the decision, I guess is the best way to put it, that it was the events from swerving and avoiding a deer, which, as you know, there are many deer here in the Central Florida area, PG. So we, again, we're not very comfortable with that answer. And as we were doing spirit box sessions and speaking to mediums and gathering more and more evidence, it seemed like collectively, including two mediums who never met each other and the spirit box sessions that I had, that there was a truck pickup that seemed to be playing chicken on that road on a regular basis. This wasn't the first time. And she was run off the road. She described the truck. She described the color in these spirit box sessions. Of course, you cannot bring that to law enforcement. They'll laugh you right out of the right out of the precinct. But it was still for us something that we needed to look into more. But they said that she swerved to avoid a deer. Bring it back forward to the story of me asking for a profound message from her. That night, coming home, I worked nights, coming home at 3 a.m., all the way back up 95, coming back into the town of Palm Coast and up through a street called Belterre on my way to my house. Speed limit's about 45 miles an hour, so you go 45, 50 in that area. Guess what passed in front of me?
That vehicle. That truck?
Nope. Not one deer, but 8 deer stopped right in front of my car, and I had enough time to stop my car to not hit any of the 8 deer. And to me, it was a message of saying, do you really think I swerved and I killed myself to avoid a deer when I could have just put on the brakes? It was a message of saying, if you could avoid this many deer, I could have avoided one deer. Now, I've been driving, as I said, 8 years back and forth from my home to work and back, and I've never, ever had a deer cross in front of me in all those years. And the day that I asked for a profound message, I get 8 deer that cross in front of me, caused me to slam on my brakes and stop. And I successfully did so without hitting any of them. Wow. And I always thought that that was one of the most profound messages I ever got from a spirit to date.
Huh.
As I said, they will respond in a way that is unmistakable.
Yeah. That is a very, very profound story. And how long ago did this happen?
The event with the 8 deer was about 2.5 years ago, just before I left for Rolling Hills Asylum. Now, there's not to be said that there have been things prior and after in communication with Amanda that she's not done things similar to this where we've asked for messages. But when I've had something like this happen and I ask profound, and I don't do that on a regular basis because, again, I think it's disrespectful to sit there. I mean, I've even sat here myself. I'm sure every investigator at one time or another, either on a case or just at home, saying to a loved one or to a spirit they've communicated with, can you just manifest for me? I won't tell anybody. I promise. I'll keep it to myself. But if you could just materialize in front of me right now, or I can hear your voice in front of me right now, I would be so grateful. And I'll be the first one to fess up and say that's never happened. It's never happened. When we were in Roswell, Georgia, Andrea and I, just a couple of months back, and we were doing an incredible spirit box session in this incredible restaurant, the cafe that we were in, on the second floor, and we had probably about 15, 16 people there, and the results were fantastic. And then I turned the spirit box off, and I said, now, with everything quiet, and we're all just sitting here, can you just clang the glasses behind the bar together, or can you give us a disembodied voice, or can you even manifest? And nothing happened. So again, we're shooting into the unknown with everything that we're trying to do to try and find out how we can get the consistency of that communication. No matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, there is going to be a success of this. The question is, PG, is who is going to make that breakthrough, and are they going to be generous enough with society, generous enough with our species to share?
Yeah. Now, as far as the other than the spirit box, as far as equipment, and I'm sure Justin will probably agree with this question too, is I see a lot of investigators use full spectrum photography, videography, and whatnot. What you see out there all the time, that it's all over eBay. You could buy this equipment anywhere, and I've seen that some of the full spectrum stuff is just a hype. What type of equipment out there? What's the basic and what's just BS? Just a toy.
Well, that comes through it again, doesn't it? We don't know. We don't know. It's not about the technology. It's so much as the application. And I'll give you the perfect example of what we're missing here, something that I've been on this quest or tirade when we do the shows and we have different guests come on or we don't, and it's whether it's Michael Bowler or myself on Monday or Andrea and myself on Tuesday, and we get into these deep discussions. Mm-hmm. If you have a particular location, PG, that you know of in the Orlando area, and everybody and anybody that's been there says, there's a little girl who runs across the stairs, the top of the stairs in this old building. She's been seen a multitude of times. That's the spot that somebody with a thermal and somebody with an infrared and somebody with the dowsing rods, but not in your hand. Put it in a couple of Coke bottles. Don't hold it in your hand.
Yeah.
But have every piece of equipment focused on that one spot. And keep it there. I mean, don't break it down at the end of the night. It's like some of these places, such as Old South Pittsburgh Hospital, that had security cameras that were set up in Wi-Fi that you can watch online. But this is what should be done. It should be set up where there's a place that there's consistency in activity, be it residual or intelligent, and focus all the attention of all the equipment on that, and then see whether or not they could capture a pattern of why things are happening the way they're happening, whether it's the set of the moonlight, or if there's an electrical storm, or there's a specific temperature, or a time of the year, an anniversary situation, or a perennial situation, whatever it may be that causes that event to happen. That's the starting point of this field. But we are just not aware of what is the equipment that we're using that is valid. What's we used so far that's worked? Well, digital audio recorders have worked, cassette recorders have worked, reel-to-reel recorders have worked, Polaroid cameras have worked, the old-style cameras with the gunpowder flash have worked, digital cameras have worked. So there's a lot out there that has the possibilities, but we're looking for consistency. That's the one thing that seems to be lacking still in this community.
Yeah. I guess so.
Hey, George, I just wanted to address something that I've run into just on some different investigations. It seems like depending on the tone of the crowd who's there, the actual, if you want to call them living people, the three-dimensional form-based people who are in on the investigation, and, whatever the dynamics are, intrapsychic, psychospiritual tone and intentions, how do you feel about that playing into whether or not you're going to capture phenomena, as a control, so to speak? Talking to spirit.
I think it's a huge factor. I think it's a major, major factor because you don't know what the empowerment of the human psyche holds. You don't know what that subconscious capability is. You don't know if anybody that's in that group has had damaged history, which is the precursor to PKE, which is a precursor to manifestation of poltergeist. There's no idea, and that's the individual. Then when you look at the group, if there's more than one with abilities, subconscious psychic abilities or physical manifestation capabilities that they're not even aware of, could certainly enhance on that. Then you're talking about the human intent as a whole. As we talked about earlier, power of prayer. If everybody is focused, now, as Andrea said, 4 people focusing on an orange, we may be consciously focusing on an orange, but every bit of our subconscious says, we're not going to move that friggin' orange. We're people. Because we've been programmed since the beginning of our lives. We've been socially programmed and polluted to not have the capability. Even though we may, it's been so suppressed, and with so much doubt in our subconscious that we're going to look at that and say there's no way we can do this, as much as we want to believe that we can. But in a group environment like that, if there is just one that has a capability of removing that doubt subconsciously, things would start to happen. Absolutely. That's why sometimes in those areas where there is a consistency of a residual or intelligent haunting, setting up all that set up all that equipment and remove the human factor. I think that's very, very important.
Right on. I believe John just chimed in. Are you there, John?
Here. How are you?
How you doing, John? Welcome to the club. Well, yeah, our lines are getting full. We got 3 calls. We got 3 guests now. Well, at least now we know our system's working.
Yes, your system's working very well, and the mischief maker has arrived.
Well, hi, John. Good evening, Buttercup.
Good evening, P.
And happy birthday, Mr. Lopez.
Well, thank you, Mr. Zappis. I'm almost catching up to you. I got my AARP card now.
Hey, if you can save a few dollars, it's worth it.
You'll never catch up to him, and neither will I, and that is the blessing.
Excuse me, young lady.
But obviously, if you could allow me to finish the sentence. But obviously, in spite of his advanced age, he has been remarkably well preserved, and I have, in fact, seen the vat of formaldehyde that he sleeps in every night.
Do you see the harassment? The harassment I have to endure.
Just getting warmed up for Ocala, you know what I mean?
Well, I think it comes with the title, because from what I'm getting from all the videos online and whatnot, you're called the Godfather. So I think the title has something to do with it.
Trust me, he's been called worse. That is a really nice name for him. We'll just stick with that.
No, that's one thing. When all of us get together and everything, we always have a very good time. Everybody's interested in, the different things that each of us are involved with. And again, to me, that's an important element with a lot of individuals out there. I'm friends with a lot of people, not just socializing and just doing different events. We're personal friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and
I'll tell you something. There's a connection here that I'm sure Justin and Paul, you don't know anything about yet, but actually John Zaffis is the nephew of Ed Warren, who investigated our house with Lorraine Warren, and he actually was one of the investigators with the TAPS group that did an investigation of the farmhouse, guests in Season 2, Episode 7 of Ghost Hunters, and was part of that investigation and can speak directly to what we endured for 10 years in that house, having been in there himself.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Unbelievable. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, too, as she's referring to the farm, it's a unique place. It was something that I heard about throughout my entire career from my uncle. And then when that golden opportunity, and it was a golden opportunity, to get invited to go work with Jay and Grant filming an episode in Andrea's old home, the old farm, was something that I was just like a kid in a candy store. And I did not walk away disappointed. Actually, there wasn't any of us that didn't have some type of an experience in that home. And that was in 2005.
10 years ago, basically.
Yeah, we were long gone. And I didn't know John yet. I had I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know him personally at that time. And it was very interesting, huh, John? The first time that we had a sit-down, face-to-face conversation, and you shared with me everything that you experienced at the farm and how it so profoundly affected you. And you know, the thing is that, you remember earlier, Justin, when I said in answer to one of your questions about how everything is interconnected, there's a point of integration and a point of coalescence, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for.
Yes.
But the thing is that as I've gotten to know George in the last couple of years, he has on a number of occasions called me, sometimes very late at night, just seeing me online and knows I'm up, and say, I'll just have a vision of the house and I'm seeing something at the farm, but it's not now, it's back when you lived there. And would describe to me. One night he called me and he said, I see your sister Cindy sitting out beside the barn, and she's sitting on a large piece of metal, and she's smoking a cigarette, and when she put it out, she stuck it down a hole. And I was like, oh, my God, George, I can't believe, where did that come from? You know, my God, because Cindy was sneaking my mom's cigarettes and going out behind the barn and sitting on top of the old engine from the English Rover that my father had pulled out of the car and replaced, and he hadn't scrapped it yet. Wow. So it sat out behind the barn for about a year. Then Cindy would go sneak a cigarette, and when she butted it out, she'd put it down in the holes where the spark plugs used to be. And that's how she hid the butts, so that nobody knew she was doing that. And he saw that and reminded me of something that I forgot about 40 years ago. You know, so there is something going on. And when we went, John actually drove up to the farm when we were there in July, and George was sitting in the front seat and I was in the back. And George had, and I'll let him tell you about it, had a really remarkable experience when we arrived at the farm, and I did not tell him where it was. I did not tell him that it was up around to the next corner on the right. So, George, why don't you share that little experience that we had last July when you saw the farm for the first time?
Well, Andrea was in the back seat. John was driving, but unbeknownst to me, as I'm looking to the right and just trying to get a sense of something, all of a sudden, John Zaffis starts holding my hand and making circles with his index finger. It was really freaky and creepy. I don't know what that meant whatsoever. Oh, not that story. No, okay, I'm sorry. No. That we, as we're driving up this road, and again, I had no idea where it was at. All of a sudden, I was getting an overwhelming anxiety, and I'm not prophetic. I'm certainly not somebody who would call himself a psychic or medium or anything of that sort. It just, for whatever reason, there seems to be a collective consciousness, maybe because of the communication that we had doing the spirit box sessions, or linking in with Andrea's psyche, or I don't know. I can't explain it. All I know is that some of the things that I've been able to describe of the inside of this home that I've never been in have been pinpoint accurate, and I don't understand why. But it's not the only situation this has happened, though. Working in conjunction with Amanda, I've helped other people who were friends of mine only, not clients, but just friends of my people in the paranormal field, when they thought things were going on in their home, and I could describe the inside of their home with extreme detail also. So it's really bizarre. I don't know what to call it yet, and I don't want to label it yet. But as we were all in this car together and we're driving up this road, anxiety was starting to build up in me, and an anxiousness in a sense. I was not sitting comfortably in the passenger side. I was moving around, and all I kept hearing in my head, a young boy, maybe the age of 9, in my head was, I don't want to go back there again. I don't want to go back there again. I don't want to go back there again. And as soon as we passed by the house, because we didn't want to stop, we're on a road there, and of course the owners are out there now, so we don't want to look like a couple of more spectators that are just hanging out. So we just drove by slowly and kept going. It subsided as soon as we went past the farm. But I don't know what relevance that was, but it was certainly enough that I think if we stopped, I would have reached a panic moment that I needed to get out of there, and I probably would have said to John, keep driving, don't stop. The kind of feeling that I had at that moment.
I mean, that sounds like almost a channeling, of sorts.
Like a channeling,
George,
or a remote viewing.
What, John?
Yeah, George, do you know that, because we're touching upon something that I think a lot of us are starting to take a look at in regards to when a lot of, just like the guys are saying, channeling, again, there just seems to be that connection with certain locations, certain information, and certain people. And you even touched upon it where, you've had that occur and happen, in other circumstances. I've had it happen. Andrea's had it happen. And it's interesting how when we come together, and a lot of times these things could be solidified. That's the best way I can describe it. And it almost makes you stop and think about, again, can we look at something, because all of us have been really hooked on this whole genetic thing. And is it a possibility that genetics somehow, some way could play in with things that we just don't even realize that they possibly could? That slight little connection that could be taking place between, so many different individuals. And is it, telepathy? Is it channeling? I don't know. I think that there's something that even goes deeper as far as a lot of things when a connection takes place with quite a few individuals.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, what we're talking about here is genetic memory, and we've been discussing this a lot on air and off. I had an extremely long and serious discussion with John about this. About 2-3 weeks ago, we got into even the aspect of demonic possession and the possibility that what genetic memory, if I can just create the foundation first, being genetic memory is what is the history of experiences of your ancestors that is still locked into your DNA. And from time to time, and again, this is all hypothesis, is there a possibility, and science is looking into this, I even sent John an article about this, that on certain occasions, including near-death experiences, traumatic experiences, physical, sexual, or physical impacts on your life at some point in time, that these codes accidentally become unlocked? Is it also a circumstance from time to time when you go to a place and you have what's called deja vu, that certain parts of that code get unlocked, and that's where the memory comes into play that I've been here before? It's happened to John on a road trip with his wife. So is there a possibility, even in that circumstance, as I approach that farm, my genetic memory, my current mind could not recognize where I was at, but my genetic memory, because maybe something ancestral had been there, that it was starting to unlock those codes, and I was starting to remember, and the panic and the stress came out of nowhere? Is that a possibility why some of us have phobias we cannot explain, because it's indicative of our genetic memory, something ancestral that is still locked in a code in us but has not been unlocked, or we have not figured out how to unlock it at this time?
Well, I'd like to share with you on that.
Go ahead, and then follow up.
Well, in some of my work, I do this protocol called noetic balancing, and when I have somebody on a table and I'm kind of dowsing over them and finding these different miasmas of energy, I inquire verbally about, what are they experiencing or what's coming to their mind right now. And I've been in sessions where people have relived death states from previous lives, whether it was a pioneer girl who was ambushed by Indians, Native American Indians during the 1800s in the move west, or various other things like that. And so I would say yes, quite possibly. And then you have proximity effect, and perhaps one of you is picking up on something else that one of the others who was in the vehicle might have gone through as well, and was just happened to be the one to bring it forth and experience that too. So yes, yeah.
Well,
it doesn't exactly work with John, because John's been around since the days of Jesus, so it doesn't really apply.
Well, then it should apply even more.
I want you, John, I want you to remember tonight to take a moment to thank the person in charge of the Paranormal Old Folks Home for letting you use the house phone to call. I think that was very thoughtful and generous. And, don't wake anybody up. Don't laugh so loudly that you wake any of the elders up. Lord. Well, John's connection.
I'm sorry, John, you got to go through this, but,
Yeah, he does.
It's okay.
It's just prep for Ocala. It's all that it is. One of the things that, earlier I talked about having moments of epiphany when we lived at the farm. And my mother's moment of epiphany was seeing a family sitting in our dining room on furniture that was not our own, that was hand-hewn oak furniture a very large table with two benches on both sides. She looked into the parlor, and there was a mother, a woman standing cooking over the fireplace. The fireplace had been sealed for more than 100 years when we moved in. The center chimney had been removed, and there was just a much smaller vent chimney to the heating system that was connected to the cellar. That fireplace didn't exist anymore, and there she was cooking over it, telling her children to go take their places at the table. Meanwhile, there were two men sitting on the other side of the table that had pewter steins in front of them that went out of favor in the 1700s because, of course, people were dying from lead poisoning, and they made the connection. So pewter steins were out of use by the 1800s, so this was indicative of 1700s. And one of the men sitting at the table in the dining room looked into the parlor, and he saw my mother and made direct eye contact with her, and then nudged the man beside him and pointed out the apparition that was standing in front of the fireplace. And the apparition, the ghost, was my mother. So to me, that is extremely telling. That was one of the moments at the farm that opens up a wide variety of questions metaphysically. One of them being, are we reliving lives over and over again? And what is the connection exactly that somebody from the past would be able to look into the future and see my mother? That really destroys the whole notion of linear time. It fractures it at the conceptual level. The second thing that happened at the house that was, as far as I'm concerned, my moment of epiphany was having a manifestation occur beside me again on the hearthstone, which was a very active part. John will attest to the fact, a very active part of the house, the hearthstone in the parlor fireplace. And I was standing there, and I felt something manifest beside me, and it turned my body to stone. I was so cold, I could not move. I could not get warm. I was standing in front of the fire, and my last conscious thought was, I'm standing too close to the fire. Why am I not warm? I had corduroys on, and I was afraid, as close as I was standing, that they could literally burst into flames. My father saw her first. He was sitting at the dining room table, and then everyone else in my family who was also in the dining room saw her, and I turned and I looked into her face. She was facing sideways toward me. So they did not see her face. They saw her body. I saw her face, and she was the spitting image of me, dressed in 17th century garb. Her hair was swept up in a bun. It was all gray, and her eyes were identical to my own. She was a mirror image reflection of me. It so stunned me and so startled me. It was that moment when I made the quantum leap from a possible belief in reincarnation to a knowledge of it. And I realized in that moment that I was most likely the reason why our family went back to the farm to fulfill my destiny, so that I could tell their story, and hopefully in the telling of their story, in the redemptive telling of Bathsheba's story in the books, hopefully release myself from ever having to go back there and live at the farm again. There was something that drew our family to that farm, and to have had that experience was probably the most life-altering experience that I've had this time around.
It's almost though as like a group reincarnation. It's like like the whole family in general.
Yeah,
had
I wonder,
experienced
because my mother was so taken by this place. There was nothing that would have stopped her from securing this property. She wrote a check for $500 earnest money that she put down on the property the day she looked at it, and it virtually emptied our family bank account. And my father was out of town and had no idea what my mother had done. And interestingly, the couple that lives there now that have been there for 28 years, she did the same thing. She bought that house, secured that property before her husband even knew about it.
Wow. Huh. Now the current owner, we can keep that secret, as far as names and stuff like that. But is there still, is the current owner now do they experience any activity as what you had experienced when you had lived down there?
Well, one can only make assumptions based on the fact that over the decades that she's been there, she has invited numerous groups into the house to investigate. And unfortunately, after the film opened, it severed our relationship that I had treasured and held dear for so many years. It was my access to the farm. It was my access to the couple that I care very much about, and I pray for her every day. Yeah. But she did an about-face. She went from having that house, talking openly in public and on news reports and on videos and doing ghost hunters and inviting them and, doing one thing after another, went from saying, my house is haunted, come figure out what's haunting my house, to go away, no ghosts here. And I understand that because of the onslaught, the plethora of lunatic fringe youngsters that came out of the woodwork to go investigate the farm after the fact, after the film came out. But the fact is that you don't invite paranormal investigative teams to your house if there's nothing to investigate.
Exactly.
And the truth of the matter is that there's no going back for us now, because once trust has been breached in a friendship, that pretty much is the end of it. But I understand her point of view, but she took it too far. And what she said after the fact was that the Perron family story is a piece of fiction. And she knows that's not true. And thousands and thousands of people who lived in that town at that time knew it wasn't true. So she's kind of in a sling. And, the problem with that is, too, I am concerned. I'll be perfectly honest with you about this. I'm very concerned. You cannot live with spirits and deny them and expect that there will be no repercussions. And, I'm concerned for her well-being, and I really hope that she resolves these issues in her mind and accepts the fact that, she lives in one of the most haunted houses in America, if not the world.
Yeah.
That's not something that one should rightfully deny. This is something to share with the world. And I understand her reticence and her reluctance, and their property was trespassed upon, and they were imposed upon in numerous ways. I get all of that. I understand. But she went so far as to say that I never even told her there was going to be a movie made of our story, and I have that on film, talking openly about her with it prior to them even picking up a camera. So she has contradicted herself in numerous venues. And I think that we should just leave it at that. And if she has any ghost stories to tell, I'll let her tell her own ghost stories or deny her own ghost stories as she sees fit.
Yeah. And, Andrea, it's really something. I was able to see those videos of you visiting and speaking quite candidly with her at a table in the home, lengthy videos, and you both seem to have a wonderful rapport like old friends. And so, wow, that's some real news.
To me, it's the black cloud that hangs over this, because I never for a moment thought that anything could sever our friendship, that it was pretty much set in stone. But it's not something that I can, and it's not that I'm incapable of forgiving, even though she went so far as to call my mother a liar, which I had kind of an explosive reaction to, as I recall, being on the phone with John Zaffis and in the car with George when that occurred. It was a little louder than I usually am. I was pretty upset about that at the time. But, I am capable of forgiving even that kind of an infraction, as my mother is, because my mother knows the truth, we know the truth, and many, many other people know the truth. So it's just a matter of letting it go and wishing somebody well on their own journey. And that's the only way that I can deal with this, to tell you the truth, Paul, because otherwise it's just too painful. It's just too hurtful. That was the last person in the world that I ever expected would try to undermine the telling of this story and sharing such an important, significant event with the world.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And and I can pretty much, kind of like step out of the situation, see how somebody could do that. But as a relationship for that long, it's. I mean, people are people. It is what it is, and it's.
Put it into light.
Well,
everybody's different.
If you really think about it, it's not that hard to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
But there are situations in life where it is imperative not to forget.
Yes.
And this qualifies as one of those situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And before I forget, just wanted to remind our listeners who we have on tonight. Our first caller in tonight was our first featured guest, Andrea Perron. Second caller was George R. Zaffet. We got so many people. See now? Okay, yeah. There's definitely spirits in this room.
I love it. I'll just talk about that.
George Lopez and John Zaffis.
Now I got to change my Facebook name.
I know, and that's so complicated.
See, I don't because on the computer here, it's just giving me the number. So if I had the names, now I know who everybody is. So, but I'm sure in a couple weeks I'll actually have a face with a name. So then it won't be hard to forget.
And that's even scarier, buddy.
I don't know what kind of frequent flyer miles John's racked up or what kind of luggage specials he gets through his credit card. But if he brings any of his haunted collection from his haunted museum, all bets are off. Because I'll tell you what, when we were up there in July, George and I had the privilege and the pleasure of staying with the Zaffis family and being able to spend as much time as we wanted in that museum. It's one of the most fascinating, extraordinary places that I have. I mean, it's attached to the house. It's just right there. So it was really fun. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but George and I are working on a book, but John just published a wonderful book that he co-authored with Rosemary Ellen Guiley called Haunted by the Things. Is it We or You? I always screw it up. Haunted by the Things We Love or Haunted by the Things You Love? Which is it, John?
It's Haunted by the Things You Love.
You love. Okay. One of these days I'm going to get that right. I've already read it. You think that I would have looked at the cover enough to get the title exactly right. But Haunted by the Things You Love is a wonderful delving into one of a series of books, delving into the stories behind the items that John has in his possession that he's been collecting for decades. And I'll tell you, honestly, as not skeptical, I don't like that word, I really don't like that word, but as curious as I was about the spirit box, not really coming down on one side or the other in terms of its effective use in terms of contact with spirits, I was equally curious about John's items because I was not one who necessarily bought into the notion that energy could attach to objects. And having gotten to know John and delving pretty deeply into this with him over the course of the last few years, I have changed my position about that. Mm-hmm. And actually, I've developed a position about that because I was sitting on the fence, which, as you well know, can get pretty uncomfortable after a while. So I came down on the side of, yes, energy is that powerful that it can literally attach to items that have been coveted or loved or so much a part of someone's life that a part of them stays with it when they pass. So I know that you're familiar with John's work on Haunted Collector, really one of the very best of the best paranormal shows that have been out in recent years. And he has a really amazing collection of items.
Go ahead, Justin.
So let's talk a little bit about this, actually, about these energies and memories, everything that is attached to these near and dear objects to those maybe who have passed, and psychometry and other ways of inquiry that you've used and how that is manifested.
Oh, John, did I put you
That
to
John-
sleep, dear?
Oh, I'm sorry. What? Go ahead. What?
Go ahead, Justin.
So let's just talk a little bit about those objects and, points of inquiry on objects that have, say, belonged to people who have passed or whatever the case may be, psychometry, other forms of inquiry, and just your process around those objects.
Well, to me, it's extremely critical. Again, I look at everything when trying to evaluate, because at the end of the day, I still look at it as I have for many years, that the fact that energy can never be destroyed. It can take on many different forms, and it can be associated. But I think the key element when we're looking and researching within the paranormal and trying to come to some type of conclusions with things, and we realize the deeper we get into it, sometimes these energies have an intelligence to it. So when trying to evaluate any item, a piece of property, or a home, as we all know, unfortunately, these particular areas cannot communicate back to us. So we try to establish any type of a communication, doing an EVP session, the spirit box, photography, many areas to try to gain some type of evidence and some type of information that can correlate to something we're dealing with. So when I do look at an item and we do seem to have some type of significance where we might be getting some type of readings off of it, tells me that there's some type of energy that can be attached. Now, again, when I look at it and try and evaluate a lot of these circumstances, is the fact that I don't always necessarily think that we're dealing with something on a negative level, because I believe very strongly that human spirit can attach to a lot of things, especially things that meant something to a person, a piece of jewelry or a piece of furniture or a photograph that they held on to very dearly. I believe that some of their energy will remain with that item. But when I'm looking at occult items, religious items, I have to view that totally differently, because there's an intent and purpose with the energy that can be associated with those items. So therefore, I proceed with caution when dealing with any type of items that would fall into the occult practices and religious items, because again, looking at this from a researcher's perspective, we have to realize that once that energy is summoned, whether it's done on a positive or on a negative, it still can have an effect on an item. So I look at things right across the board. I still work with psychics. I still work with mediums. I always have, always will. And I like to take all the information and pull it together to try to be able to resolve something, especially if we're dealing with a haunted item.
And what would some of those notable items be that you would want to just present on the air here?
Oh gosh, there's so many different things, but and it's always so difficult to just pick randomly certain. We'll hit on 3 items that came in last week.
Okay, great.
I got 2 big boxes that had come in, and that's from the Jewish faith, where they believe very strongly in negative energy, not necessarily anything that's evil. And they put items and different things into these boxes, and they seal them. And it's a tradition within Judaism that's been done for many, many, many years. And it was extremely odd that 2 cases came about at the same time where people, had purchased these items and brought them into their homes and started having activity. And neither one of the boxes, the seal wasn't broken on them. They were still sealed. But yet they still had activity that started to occur and happen. So therefore, when I look at that and I take the big understanding of it, as much as I experiment and as much as I like to know what something is in detail, those boxes, I will never break the seals on them.
Right.
To me, again, doing research and evaluating, looking at things from a respectable point of view, or looking at something from a study, sometimes we have to use our logic. in determining these things. So, when you look at the collective, when you start pulling all this together on items, you got to be very careful because it can be a very explosive environment if you're not very cautious and very careful when you start experimenting with these things. A lot of religious items. I had a statue that was donated to a church. It's about 3 foot tall, and they started having all kinds of activity within the church, and I got called in and I was asked to remove it. And when we brought it back to the museum, we started having water spots appearing in front of it. And then as the research began and we were delving into everything, we found out that the woman was basically practicing a lot of different things. And as we know with certain practices out there, they use the religious statues and basically use it in a reverse for what people would do, as far as a Christian perspective with the saints and the different things. So therefore, again, these are items I look at and study and try to comprehend how certain things can occur and certain things happen.
So there's like a lot of intentive energy depending on how many hands a particular object has been through, whether it's been with one family or several different people, depending on the people and their intentive energy. It's been passed on to it. It's basically a collective of all this spiritual energy from the living that has just been attached to it.
Absolutely. Again, there's items, that have been around for hundreds of years, and there's never been any issues whatsoever. And all of a sudden somebody will purchase something or they'll inherit something from, a relative, and all of a sudden they could start to have paranormal activity. Do I believe the strong possibility is there and residing with the item that you have that collective energy from hundreds of years? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, too, is like, so I definitely want to let the listeners know when we mean paranormal, it's not a negative, not always a negative connotation. Paranormal just means there's just an activity or a phenomenon that we have yet to explain and kind of pinpoint. So.
Yes, I agree with that.
So I've got a question for you, regarding these figures, items that you have in your collection. So what kind of containment do you have for these, for your own protection, so to speak, when you're not studying them, just for the listeners out there?
There's a lot of different things that I practice and do. I'm Roman Catholic, so naturally there's a set of things that I do as far as using holy water, sea salt, and several other prayers. But when I deal with items, of different caliber, Native American or, Judaism and across the board, or, Satanism, we have a lot of different variety of things out there. So therefore, the procedure with trying to bind energy to an item or to try to break it can vary depending on what I'm working with, how I'm working with, because again, at the end of the day, you still have to take a look at that as a investigator, into these items. And therefore, when dealing with it, you're going to have the energies and a lot of the different things that are going to be associated from a collective could come from a different belief system altogether. I mean, it's just like I have a huge collection, and George Lopez even donated to this part of it, of a lot of things that come from the islands with statues and a lot of these masks. The intent and purpose behind them, they are carved to represent different deities out there. And a lot of times when these have been used in ceremonies or in a lot of different types of scenarios, they can basically have that energy deliberately associated with it. So therefore, when it comes into a different environment, it can trigger paranormal activity.
It almost reacts to it.
Yeah.
I was talking, and it's not only even objects. There's been a couple cases I've had where not really necessarily renovation, but changing something in the house, like the color of the paint in a room will change the energy. And I see that I see that more often than anything else. Just changing the paint color in a bedroom or a living room or whatnot will change the dynamics of the energy in the room and whatnot. Have you come on a lot of cases like that?
Oh, absolutely. Again, lining different things up. It's a joking thing, and Andrea's going to bust out laughing, but feng shui, I mean, it does work.
Mm-hmm.
Because her and I have this running joke that she's always doing kung fu and everything on me, and I just switched it to, watch it, she's getting ready to feng shui me again. But, aligning and setting certain things up, I believe very strongly in that. That's something that's been practiced, for thousands of years. The colors of an environment can alter that. I mean, gosh, there's even scientific studies done on that. Where
Yes,
changing the color of the environment can change the whole attitude about an individual. Moving furniture in certain patterns can totally change that whole energy field within a room. So I believe very strongly in that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not relegated to our five senses, but our five senses function very powerfully in our lives. And one of the things that really triggered activity at the farm was not changing the color of anything, but when my mother took a crowbar to the front of the face of the fireplace in the parlor, insisting that she was going to freeze to death in that house, having not yet delineated between the difference between natural cold and supernatural cold. There was an infestation in the house that was causing the house would not retain any heat. And she said, that's it, we're going to open up the fireplace. We've got a woodshed full of seasoned wood. We're going to use it. And when she took a crowbar to that fireplace, all hell broke loose in our house. That was the day she was beaten in the bathroom of the closet in the bathroom with that heavy hanger. And that was really what triggered all of the major manifestations in her bedroom and in the parlor. From that point on, nothing had happened prior to what I think was perceived by the spirits as some major upheaval in their house that they didn't appreciate.
Wow.
Change is not always a good thing.
Yeah,
and yet what it released, it's also inevitable. And what it released, the thing I didn't understand, and the point that my mother made to me when I was writing about this in the books, was you'd think they'd be happy to see the house restored, that they'd be happy to see fireplaces opened and used again in the way that it was during their time. But it seemed to just be more of the sense around it was more of a resentment. Like, what does she think she's doing to our house?
Yeah, it was like the energy that she had used in that action.
Yeah.
It
was very negative.
Yeah.
And it triggered a lot of negative behavior after that. And, John and George can both speak to that, too, about how something seemingly innocuous can trigger a negative event, and you don't even realize, that what you're doing is causing, that's what's initiating the problem, because it seems as though the activity itself seems utterly benign, and yet in retrospect it appears as though someone took offense.
Yeah. Anybody else want to reiterate on that? John, George?
Well, go ahead, George. You got something to add to that one?
Yeah, Reader's Digest version, but pretty much both you guys are aware of it, and it was something that was, and you asked a question earlier as to whether or not, what I do for protection, what any of us do for protection. And there are many of us out there, myself included, who always felt very, very religiously grounded, although I'm not one that's a churchgoer. I know where my faith lies. Mm-hmm. But I also understand that there's risk involved in this field. And, when I go in feeling confident about my God protecting me. But in one particular incident, in an old Florida ghost town, that was our training facility, I made the ultimate mistake. There's a portal or something that's just not right, something that's a little askew of this plane of existence that we could not figure out what it exactly was, but we knew that it was originating from this particular closet, this portal, and I made the worst possible decision ever. And I stood in that closet with the door closed and said, "Show me where you come from. Show me where you're from." And the visions that I had right then and there scared me out of the closet. And then I had a couple of experiences, some spiritual terrorism. I mean, it was an innocent question, show me where you come from, but the ramifications were some attacks that happened on me to such a degree. I had called Andrea, I had called John Zaffis, I had called Bishop Long, and said I need to deal with this one way, shape, or form, and they all gave tremendous advice on it, which is stay strong. And there were 4 particular incidents and 2 maybes after, and these were all in an unconscious state during sleep that these attacks had occurred. In each and every one of those, I woke up fighting. Whether it was verbally or physically, I woke up fighting, which was more of a reinforcement for me than ever that my faith is strong, because I was ready to fight. Even in the depth of my subconscious, I was ready to fight. But it's just that quick and that easy that you could make an attempt to do something with all the correct intent and wind up basically pissing something off or getting the attention of somebody you don't need to.
Wow. Well, what's your take on it, John?
Well, basically the same thing, too. Like George was just explaining, one of the most common things that we see occur when dealing with a haunting or different types of situations where people have issues going on, the dream state is the most common denominator that we see across the board. And one of the theories that I look at and apply to this is that's the most easiest and convenient way for a spirit to communicate. They will come through in the dream state because we continuously hear that. And I look at it from the factor that it takes little energy in comparison to doing a physical thing to be able to communicate that information to an individual. And I think that's part of, an interesting perspective, because I know how George thinks and how he evaluates things and looks at things. So when he does have something occur or something transpires where it makes him take that step back and look at the big picture and just go, this stuff really goes on and this stuff really happens, it makes each and every one of us look at something different and look at it to evaluate it differently. That's why I always, when somebody tells me they're skeptical, they've never had an experience, they've never witnessed anything, I understand that. And I can relate to that, because it's very difficult for anybody to accept the fact that these things go bump in the night and these things happen unless you witness something, or, you've been in that environment and you've witnessed, somebody having something occur or happen. Mm-hmm. But once that does, it changes the way you think, and you have to reassess. You have to relook at the big picture and just say to yourself or to myself, wow, I just seen it. I just witnessed it. Therefore, that just altered everything that you're taught. You're just totally re-looking and reevaluating so many things that you were told not to believe in, not to accept, that these things really do occur and they really do happen, to people right across the board, whether they're kids, adults, or, someone that's an older person that has an experience for the very first time. Mm-hmm. It really changes their perspective on how they have to evaluate something now.
And I think that's of the first thing. I think the first thing I could definitely validate is we are definitely more susceptible when we are sleeping. We are more vulnerable that way, and the other side knows that. Depending on whether it's a malevolent force or whatnot, they understand that and they know that, and that's the best way for them to contact us is through dream mm-hmm. state and whatnot. And all the clients, pretty much the majority of all the clients that I've had that would report stuff, usually the first thing out of their mouth is something about a dream. Oh, well, at first it all started about a dream and this and that, and then it would progress into, oh, I'm seeing this and I'm hearing that and whatnot. It all starts within the dream state.
Yes, and also let's factor in dream paralysis as well. Yeah. There's those in the scientific community, particularly in medicine, that say that that's a natural phenomenon, and I beg to differ, because I have suffered it myself in very specific incidents where I know that I was absolutely wide awake. I was having very clear, very specific images transferred to me. I saw what was happening to my mother down on the first floor of the house. I could hear her telepathically, not physically, telepathically screaming my name for help. And I knew that I was absolutely incapable of moving a molecule of my body. I was not under control. I did not maintain control of my own body. It was being maintained for me, and it was being relegated to a motionless position for a reason. I was absolutely clear on it when it was happening, and I'm as clear as I am now. Sleep paralysis functions, and I don't know, again, as George says, we don't know. I don't know exactly what it was that stopped me from intervening on her behalf that early morning at 5:15 in the morning. But whatever it was deliberate, it was purposeful, and when what she was enduring was over, I was allowed to leave the bed.
Wow, you have substance.
I'd like to add something to that.
What I wanted to add, we got Maria coming on here just a second, the important notion. What you are doing with the launch of this show, the official launch next Sunday, the 18th, congratulations. And what I've been laboring over the last 7.5 years, and it has been a labor of love, but it's been a labor because this is not a very easy field to convince of anything. It's a very jaded field, very separated field. And we're always just trying to move forward, be it a slow crawl at sometimes. But what's important is what we do with these shows. As an example, like I said, the events that have happened, those night terrors, or as John calls it, spiritual terrorism that I had, I wound up almost immediately, right after the holidays, because it was about a year ago, and I did a broadcast and told, not in complete detail, but everything that transpired. And the reason why is I wanted it documented, number one. If things were going to get worse, and John said it possibly could, as Andrea says, once you're touched by spirit, it never goes away. In this instance, I may be under this attack for the rest of my life. But just like terrorists, these malevolent entities have all the time in the world to work on you and try and wear you down. That's how possession eventually happens, is through that constant barrage of attacks. But I'm so grounded, again, I don't think that that's going to happen. So it's a testimony that I needed to give to our listeners and say, listen, if things start happening also to you, this is what's held them at bay. That's what's helped me to survive the attacks that they were trying on me. And some of them were vicious. I mean, vicious in my subconscious. But I needed to make sure that this was documented and given to the world. That's what we should be doing as investigators when we have experiences, is sharing that knowledge. So having you as an addition also in doing these shows is critically important, and I'm so glad that you started on and embarked on this endeavor, and I wish you the best of luck.
And thank you, and I definitely appreciate your time and your work in the field and being on our program tonight. Definitely.
Well, you're focusing on something that's so important. I mean, conscious radio, you're focusing on what we focus on, collective consciousness. What is this thing called mind that we all seem to share, that we all seem to tap into? And what is it that causes this eternal connection between all of us, not just across the spectrum of time, but in literally sharing space with each other, even if we're sharing cyberspace. And one of the things that George and I focus so much on in terms of our broadcast is the whole notion that thoughts are things, and that every time you throw a pebble in the pond, it creates waves and concentric circles, and these notions go out. And so for all intents and purposes, it doesn't matter if you've got, hundreds or thousands of people listening to you. Someone's getting the message, and then perhaps they're passing that message on. And that's the only way for us to expand global consciousness, is to do it, through any venue at our disposal. And this is a very powerful one, and I congratulate both of you on securing this. I know that it will be extremely successful for you.
And we got bigger dreams, bigger aspirations, and a bigger growth. And I want to also bring in Maria. Are you there?
Howdy from Casadega, Florida.
Hi, Maria.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hi.
I also, I'm including my husband, Bob. my strength and my motivation. So I hope he's okay to join in the call.
Absolutely.
Not a problem.
That's wonderful. Hi,
Perfect.
Bob. Welcome. I shouldn't say that. I'm not exactly the host, but I certainly welcome you.
Awesome, guys.
I guess here. Let's go ahead and just get on speakerphone on that end, and we can wait. All right. So, hey, Andrea, warm welcome. So go ahead and shoot it out again.
Oh, Bob, it's wonderful to have you join us. I'm so looking forward to meeting you in person, and I know that George has had ample opportunity to get to know you, so I'm going to kick him to the curb when we get down to Ocala so I can have some time as well to get to know you, too.
Awesome. Likewise, I look forward to meeting you.
I'll be there soon.
Okay. It's coming sooner than we want.
The pressure's mounting.
The pressure is mounting, but it's good. It's pressure.
I apologize in advance for John Zaffis. I have absolutely no control over him whatsoever, and anything could come flying out of his mouth at virtually any moment. Just so you've been properly forewarned.
I give them 24 hours before they vacate you.
Oh, hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Isn't it past your bedtime?
Audrey's harassing me.
I know, and that's why I'm here to sort of leverage that out. I thought this was past your I thought that was past your bedtime hour, John.
Marie, don't join the ranks on me.
See, I didn't know whose idea that was anyway.
They're letting him
Helping
use
your
the house
advocate,
phone.
John, this is Bob Schmidt. I haven't spoken to you, but nice talking to you for the first time, and hopefully we'll have a chance to speak several times before the actual event. So looking forward to doing that.
Looking forward to it, sir. Looking forward to it.
So what I'd like to do in this last hour, I'd like to have Marie explain what this event is, what the future, what she wants to see from this event past this year, and what everybody's ideas of what they want to contribute in the next couple weeks to this event, and I'll give the podium over to Maria.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. Well, when we first got started with the idea of creating a film or a television series that would be almost like a coast-to-coast, where the experts and the persons that brought the theory of the metaphysical gift would come together. And so we did that and worked on a very successful piece where we brought some good talent to discuss some of the communication with the spirit modes. And I said, well, we got to get this out there. And, if Seven Sisters rents a big old theater and just says, come on over, I don't think we'll get anybody. So I made a few phone calls, and we gathered a few extremely well-rounded and just incredible folks, amazing folks. And what's really mushroomed out of this is that the folks that are joining us are people that hold the integrity and hold the honesty and the pureness, if we can find any, in this industry or in this community. So it just became an incredibly wonderful opportunity to send our message out about what we felt were the pureness and the reality of, and I hate to call it paranormal because I don't believe it's a deviation from normal, but of the spiritual world, which exists, which we witness every day, almost every day at the Seven Sisters Inn. So we're ambassadors to that message of that purity. And I think with the collection of folks that we have there, that's why we selected specifically that name, a paranormal reality experience, because this truly is the reality of the paranormal that we experience on a daily, that most of us experience on a daily basis. Where do I want this to go? I don't know. It's almost like this is taking a life of its own. And and the direction of where it's going is unclear right now, but it's defined. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I don't see that there's confusion in the path. I see that there is a solid path being formed in front of us, but where it's leading, I don't know. It's almost like life, you know. Bob, I think Bob is wanting to continue.
Yeah, and I think basically what's going to happen here, to answer the future question, is that we're assembling a high-quality program here, like Maria said, that has a lot of integrity to it, not the shock value, but the more intellectual look at the topic here, the paranormal. It also gives people, you know, that come to us, John and everybody else included in the program, to share their experiences and what will work in the future. And that's what we're really looking forward to. This is experimental at this point, but a lot of clarity will be given to us, I'm sure, once we connect with everybody on a personal level, and they tell us what things they've done across the country and how this can grow a life of its own in the future. So I think that's going to be a big learning experience for us. And so we're very proud to have the lineup we have and feel like we're here to learn, here to serve, here to be sort of a conduit for something that becomes, and I hate to keep using that word, but, you know, I tell people that when they come to this, they will have an opportunity to ask questions. If they're skeptics, come anyway. It's a safe forum. It's not something where we're going for shock value. So people that have sort of an interest but don't want to be involved in something that might be scary or whatever, this is the reality part of it. They can ask questions about
it is a safe place in the same way that our show is. It is a safe place to land in cyberspace. You know, Maria is the one that turned me on to you and speaks so very highly of you. And I knew that this would be a safe place for me to come. You know, you never know what you're going to get. It's kind of like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates out there.
Yeah.
But in reference to something that Maria said just a few minutes ago that I thought was a very thoughtful and erudite comment, I believe truly that like attracts like, that it's an immutable law of the universe. And I think that what Maria has done is she has attracted a group of people who are not only like-minded, but in some respects share the same heart. I know I can speak for myself, and I feel certain that I can speak for George and John, two of the finest men that I know, that I've ever met, that there is purity of heart among some of us. Now, we all know that there's a whole group inside the paranormal that's looking for the white-hot spotlight of Hollywood, that's looking for, you know, the glamour shots, that's looking for the recognition and getting a spot on TV, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
But they're a relatively small group, and I find that most of the people that I encounter in this community are very ardent, very encouraging of one another. And it's not just a matter of that's what I attract with the friends that I have. I think that it's probably the truth of most of the people who are in this for the right reasons. And what we have to do is simply ignore the ones that are in it for the wrong reasons. And eventually they will go away.
Yeah, and I remember Maria had made a quick statement. I think it was within the last day on our the group Facebook message. She mentioned the word pioneer, and I feel that very highly. I feel we have a group of people that are pioneers into changing this field of bringing more awareness. And I think that's our job. I think, we've brought together like-hearted people and a high functionality of pioneers to change this into not an industry, but a field of higher science and understanding within the mass consciousness of what should be.
And ethics as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But, here's the thing. Regardless of whatever progress we do or do not make scientifically, this field is legitimate on its own terms. Acknowledging the spirit realm is legitimate in its own respect, whether or not we ever capture anything further from this moment on. If there's never another photograph, if there's never another EVP, an audio clip of any kind, no disembodied voices, that does not null and void the existence of the spiritual realm. It is a part of our realm. It is all, otherwise none of us would be able to have any sensory experience of it at all. So the science, adding the science into it, coming to a point of integration and understanding on a higher level, I think, is aided by the science. That's your evidence. That's your proof, quote unquote. But it exists regardless of whether or not we are able to capture anything, and should be regarded as significant in its own respect.
Yeah. Very good.
I don't know. I'm only going to this thing for bacon.
Is that George? George, happy birthday.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. I'm coming to this. Well, I'm only coming to this thing for the bacon, so you know.
Yeah, well, we know. I heard Maria's an excellent cook. I'm coming for the brunch for sure.
Oh no, it's Bob. Andrea, I have to correct you there. It's my Bob. He is the breakfast master, and I don't want to take that title away from him.
Okay, well, I will be sure to fawn all over him when we get there.
I want to know whose recipe was that of the pumpkin soup this past Halloween? Who made that?
That was Maria's.
Wow, I'm coming back for that.
I do want George to know that we don't consider bacon a breakfast food. That's a 24-hour-a-day food. So, George, we'll have it for you around the clock, bud, okay?
I'm moving in. That's all. I'm moving in. And that's the one thing, too. I've had the privilege of now visiting on a couple of occasions this incredible bed and breakfast, Seven Sisters Inn, and, I've been praising it all up and down. And the only thing that you need to have ready for Mr. Zappis is coffee every morning. Make sure the coffee maker's full. That's it. But I can tell you, everyone that is attending this event the weekend of the 24th of January are going to be blown away by what I would consider, and I've somewhat been an aficionado of hotels, motels, and inns traveling all over this country. I've been so blessed in my life to have the traveling bug and been able to fulfill that addiction and go to so many different places. By far, and I'm not saying this because of how amazing both Bob and Maria are. They are the most gracious of hosts I have ever met. This is a 5-star bed and breakfast. This is an amazing place, and I think that everyone that goes to this event, whether it's guests, whether it's celebrity, whether it's just somebody coming in to get an autograph, are just going to be absolutely blown away by this incredible location. Seven Sisters Inn is one of my favorite places on the planet, bar none.
And I definitely vouch for that. 5 stars.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very kind. Well, it's any place is made up from the spirituality that's in it, and certainly I will go on record saying that Bob has an amazing spirit, and he makes the end what it is. I'm the technology behind this, so I can't take too much credit for that, but he's the one that puts that love into it, and I'm very blessed to have him.
Maybe Bob, and we can get John Zappis in the kitchen together, and John can make his world-famous macaroni.
Oh, that sounds like what. Just send me the ingredients, John. I'll have it ready for you.
Okay, it sounds good.
Yeah. Well, in the same way that, Paul and Justin are doing their thing, launching this new broadcast, in the same way that George and I do our thing, writing and doing our broadcast, you're providing a venue as well. You are, this event is very exciting in that it is going to bring some people who really know what they're doing together. And, talk about the ultimate in terms of networking and sharing information. That's what's so exciting about this for me, because I know almost everyone that's going to be at this event. And so much has happened in all of our lives, consecutively over these last months since we've been together in one venue or another around the country. And it gives us an opportunity, to sit around a table and to talk about experiences that we've had and how things are changing and where the momentum is going. And that is invaluable in that it re-inspires each one of us to keep going. It will plant seeds in Paul's mind, in Justin's mind, in George's mind, that we will act upon later. And that's what it really is, like the nucleus of the energy, and watch what happens from the explosion afterwards. I think that it's going to be a very exciting event. I'm truly looking forward to it.
Oh, it sounds it sounds like a plan, Andrea. It sounds like a plan. I feel the same way. I feel absolutely the same way. And again, it's almost like, I think Bob used the word conduit. Like we have been provided the means of being a conduit of putting all this together. We're breaching some rules. We're breaching some rules found in the typical American paranormal reality story that's out there. But that's okay. We've got the good soldiers that will help us, maintain our own set of rules that maybe will take some wings someday.
Sometimes you have to break some protocol. Sometimes you have to break certain controls, make up your own controls, ask the same questions differently in order to get the real answers that we're looking for, especially in this field.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
it's not even so much breaking them. As George is so fond of saying, he makes it up as he goes along. But that's true. We all do.
That's intuition, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's instinct and it's intuition, and it's listening to that little voice inside you, and it's believing what you see with the third eye.
And trusting it.
And trusting it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, out of chaos comes order. We will have several times throughout this incredible weekend, which includes investigations of 3 definite locations, possibly 4 if some people get so privileged, and of course some social time, some vendors' time, and it's just, again, it's not something that, and I've seen the detailed work that Maria has put into her computer as far as getting this entirely formatted for the entire weekend. But things never go as planned, and that's what makes it more fun. And it depends on the people that are organizing it, depends on the people that are involved with it. If they are stress-based, it's going to be a calamity. If they are not, and I know Maria and Bob certainly are not, I know I'm not, and I know that the majority of the people that are going to be there as guests, celebrities, are not in any way freaked out by things, it's going to be even that much more fun. If things start to go awry, that's when the stories, the great stories that we tell for months, if not years afterwards, do you remember when this happened and that happened? That's what makes it more memorable than anything else, is when things tend to not work as planned. That's when it's a lot more fun. And I'm making that prediction for that weekend. And if it doesn't happen, I'll make sure that I cause some chaos.
Hey, George, Hey, George, I'd just like to say it's all grace already, and you just opened that right up for the grace to come in, so thank you.
Yeah. At least now we know where it came from.
Yes.
we know the root cause. Yes.
I'm the wrench in the works. That's me. I'm the fly in the ointment.
Yeah. The bubble gum and the gears.
Yeah, we'll get it going. We'll have a good time with it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, that would be, I know I'm overstepping my boundaries here, Paul, but Maria, please throw out the information again. As a matter of fact, today, as people were giving me wonderful birthday wishes, someone came back again and said, are there still tickets available for Saturday? What's available, and how can they get it with what's left?
Exactly.
The Saturday VIPs, the structure of the show is made up of the core being the premiere at the theater. That is the core that kind of glues everything together. That is the basic ticket that is available, and yes, there are plenty of those seats available. Attached to that is the VIP privilege, and there's an investigation at the tail end or at the end of that Saturday presentation, and one preceding it on Friday night. So attendees that want to do the VIP, which is a complete package of the premiere showing at the Marion Theater, plus the kickoff VIP party, plus the vendor show, and obviously the investigation of the three buildings, plus some, that all is given a choice of whether you want to do that all on, if you want to do the investigation on Saturday, or if you wish to do the investigation on Friday night. Saturday is closed. The VIP Saturday is closed. It's sold out. Now we're about 50% sold out on the VIP for Friday. So that's where it's all going. But we are doing an aggressive advertising campaign the last 2 weeks before the show. So we're hoping and feel pretty confident it will be a sold out show for our guest stars. And that's the goal that Bob and I are.
Yeah. And before we actually finish up, or after we finish up the show after 11 o'clock, if I want to talk to Maria after we're done, as far as some business and that afterwards and stuff like that, if she can stay on. But
sure.
Yeah, Justin.
Hey Maria, can you go ahead and present who all of the people are who are going to be on?
Oh yeah, let's do a presentation as far as the names and the people and who they're associated with. Of everybody that is all the celebrities and shows and their associations and stuff like that for Saturday.
Well, we're very proud to present our headliner, Mr. John Sappis from the Haunted Collector, and most importantly, what we consider the godfather of the paranormal, a very respected man in the field. His co-host of Haunted Collector, Brian Kano, will also be there. The Dead Files, Steve DeChavy, will be there, the detective from Brooklyn, alongside of Scott Pepperman. He's with Ghost Hunters International. And, of course, our board, Andrea Perron, and she's from House of Darkness, House of Light, author, the influence of the movie Conjuring. Of course, the esteemed master of ceremony, our own George Lopez from Dead Air Radio. Stacey Jones, formerly known as the Ghost Cop, has had lots of experience as decades of being one of the first females investigating in the field. Scotty Rourke is from Z-Talk Radio. He's also a nationally known medium. On the investigation side, we present Tim Maley from Fox City Paranormal Radio and team. And bringing some youth into the mixture is Jared Winovich. And he is actually part of the Walking Dead, as well as the American Horror Story, as well as the Hunger Games. So, well-rounded group. We have a little bit of strong tenure in the field, as well as folks that are just getting into it in the paranormal end, and also in the medium end. So it's extremely well-rounded, but just a good group of folks.
And anybody else's input, definitely. Yeah. Go ahead.
And don't forget, Steve DeChavy from the Dead Files will be there. Scott Tepperman from Ghost Hunters International, and plenty of bacon.
Oh yes, bacon, bacon. Not Kevin Bacon. But.
And I wanted to make a really important call out here for George Lopez, not because it's his birthday, but because he's been the magical force behind this entire event, and we could not have gone anywhere without his inspiration, his motivation, his intellectual strength in getting this pinned down for us, and Bob and I really appreciate that.
And George's willingness to come out in person and just spend time walking through the venue, offering his advice and experience from all the different events he's attended. He's given us invaluable input in terms of how to, I think, factor in really human nature a little bit. Don't try to cram too much in. Try to do what you can to make it a worthwhile experience, but kind of keep it at a level where everybody knows what they're being offered, they're going to get. And so we want to thank George very much for that.
It's been my pleasure. And considering I've taken 22-hour trips with Andrea Perron, an event an hour and a half from my house, I'll do any day.
Wait a minute. I'm not sure I appreciate the tone of that comment. I really don't. It seems to me one should be as pleasurable as the other.
Absolutely.
Should I chime in on that one?
No.
Am I?
George, I tried.
No. Let me put in a little or disclaimer. The 22 hours only felt like 7. It was a wonderful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I wanted to just take a minute and maybe explain a little bit. There's a little confusion about the Friday and Saturday investigation. And I just want to take a moment to explain that to listeners that might be considering coming.
Mm-hmm.
If you buy a VIP ticket and it's on Friday night, it's basically a 2-night event for you. You come in, only thing we're doing on Friday evening is an investigation with the group that we just mentioned in the buildings that we have available to do them in. Then you come back the next day, and the vendor show starts at 4 at the Marion Theater, so you've got all day to rest up and come in. If you've done the VIP investigation on Friday, when the show ends at the theater on Saturday evening, your participation has basically been completed. It's a new group coming over for the Saturday. The Saturday's the one that is sold out. Everybody there is going to be coming, we assume, at 4 for the vendor, the VIP party, the thing at the show, at the theater, and the investigation that night. One of the things we're stressing to local people that we talk to is that, yes, you're going to give up a Friday and a Saturday night to do this, but it's going to be a different experience. You've got all these stars coming in. They're going to be freshly there. They're not going to have a full day behind them. Freshly. Okay. And they're going to be ready to investigate on Friday night. Not that you won't be on Saturday, but it's going to be a little different feel because that's what's happening Friday alone. So it's not that VIPs will get any less or any more if they do it on Friday or Saturday. It's just going to be a little different because they're coming only for the investigation Friday and then everything up through the end of the show on Saturday. And then when we come back Saturday, people have to remember, of course, they're all sold out, but they're going to be there much later because after the show ends at 10 at the theater, then we start the investigations later. On Friday, we start the investigations earlier in the evening, and so that starts at 8:30. So some people are a little confused on what the VIP means. It's just what I just said here, and hopefully that's clear as mud.
And people can find the venue, and the venue can be found on the website, correct?
I want to go back to that statement about that stars and the experts are coming in freshly.
Yeah, especially George. He's fresh.
Or John, I hope.
Yeah, no, what I want to chime in, what's an important selling point here, and it is a selling point because, again, this is an event. People are paying good money to come and have this opportunity. And for those that have been sitting there going, wow, I really wanted the tickets for Saturday, now they're sold out, and now it's going to be a 2-day event. Here's the neat thing. Here's the one thing, especially those of you who are either amateur or seasoned investigators, and this is a great location. These are 3 historical buildings, 50 feet, 75 feet from each other. So the rotation is very, very fast, too, which is neat. But if you're doing the Friday night investigation, and Saturday night prior to the theater event is a wonderful meet and greet, and I want Maria and Bob to go ahead and give a promotion out to that location. But there's going to be vendors tables and then a meet and greet, VIP meet and greet. If you've done the Friday night investigation and you've taken that Saturday to review and have caught some tremendous evidence, not only can you share it with the celebrities at the meet and greet, but it's evidence for us to use for the second investigation that night. You've now contributed to a great part of this paranormal community. That's the important part of that Friday night event. And Bob, what is the location across from the theater that we're having the meet and greet at, sir?
Well, the nice thing is, just like you said about the homes that are being investigated, which includes Seven Sisters Inn, the building next door, which is the original Seven Sisters Inn, in close proximity to each other. The theater is directly across the street. I mean directly across the street from a very nice venue there. It is known as Mavericks Pub. It is a sizable place where we can comfortably fit our vendor location. And then the other room that only the VIPs have access to mingle with everybody that's being a part of the show is directly across the street. So once you're parked, everything becomes very, very simple. The venue, we will have food and drink, and it will just be a great way, we hope, to casually mingle, discuss things. And George, you brought up a great point. For people that buy the VIP tickets for Friday, I mean, from our vantage point, of course, we have the luxury of being right there. We don't have to travel, but I think Friday would be a great night to investigate without all the other things going on, and just have the investigation. And like you said, to bring that information over and be part of only a few that get to do this with the stars. So the venue, again, is known as Mavericks. It will be a very nice arrangement that we have set up so everybody can be casual and mingle and actually talk. It's not a place that's going to be playing loud music. We're going to have everything arranged with the owner of that place. He knows what type of event it is, and he's being very, very cooperative with us being able to set up the way that we think will allow everybody to have the best experience. Sound good?
That's awesome. Good job.
Hey, that sounds great, especially on a Friday night, And think about Friday night instead of a Saturday night. You get to be the first one in there. It's probably going to be a little bit more low-key. The energy is definitely going to be different than after the show. So I'd encourage everybody to get out there Friday night while they can. So, yeah it sounds great.
Yeah.
We've got about not quite half of the VIPs sold on Friday. We're limiting, obviously, the number so that we can have smaller groups rotating between the buildings. We're going to have...
That's a very important component, that we're limiting the size of the groups as they rotate into the 3 buildings from 10 to 12 people. That means at any given point, when a group that is being led by a medium, an actual medium, these are very seasoned mediums and very tested mediums, as a team leader, she'll take her group of 10 to 12 people into this large structure. So there's going to be a lot of intimacy, and I think that's a really important part of our event. It is intimate. It's small. It's, even though we have 300 people at the Marriott Theater, but the actual investigations are organized so that you can have a very personal, a very intimate experience with the investigation process, as well as the stars and experts that are contributing. So that's, Ocala is a small town, and everything around Ocala is non-stressful, and everything's close with each other. So you're going to feel a good sense of closeness, of intimacy, of direct relationship with the experience that we hope to offer our attendees.
And in addition, one thing people should know if they're coming from out of town is that the proximity to everything, the hotel setup we have for people to come in is very close. Once you're there, either at the theater or at the inn, depending on what night you're on, we're only 5 blocks from the downtown where the theater and the venue for the VIP party are. So it's not like you have to travel 6 miles in traffic to go from the investigative spot to the downtown to enjoy the actual forum. It's only 5 blocks away. So everything is compact and I think going to be very well run and very rewarding for, we hope everybody. We hope everybody will get something out of this.
Awesome. Great. And yeah, before we close off the show, I want to do a quick introduction to everybody who has been on the show thus far this evening. Our first guest, featured guest this evening is Andrea Perron, author of House of Darkness, House of Light, also the inspiration of the hit film horror movie last year, The Conjuring. Our second guest, George R. Lopez. I got that right that time. Host of Dead Air Paranormal Radio, and is also going to be our Master of Ceremonies for this venue. Our third call-in guest is John Zaffis, godfather of the paranormal investigation field, also the star of The Haunted Collector on the Sci-Fi channel. Our fourth guest is Maria Pon Schmidt. How do you pronounce the last name? Schmidt?
Schmidt is fine, yeah.
There we go. Organizer of a paranormal reality experience, which is being held in Ocala, Florida, on evening of January 23rd and evening of January 24th. And also want to, as far as station identification, this is a Conscious Radio Network, and we air every Sunday night from 7 to 11 o'clock. Luckily, as of yet, we don't have any paying sponsors, so we have no commercial breaks. So it's a continuous run. However, if there's anybody out there that does want to advertise through our radio, definitely not a problem. We won't have any problems with that. But it'll at least allows our guests to definitely chat it up, get as much information out there as much as possible, and we don't have to interrupt. So there is no interruptions. So, but anyway, I want to let you guys, we've got about, what I'd say, 20 minutes to, let everybody give their last, I'll start with you, Andrea, last couple comments and whatnot before we end our program.
Well, I appreciate that. I would like to use your venue to invite people to join us at ours, George Lopez being my co-host, World Awakening, every Tuesday night on the Dead Air family of shows on Blog Talk Radio. World Awakening is our baby. It's the thing that we just love sharing and love doing every week. I speak for myself, and I think for George as well, in that our hope is that we really make a difference, some kind of a difference in the world for the better with this broadcast. So our aspirations seem to be the same in terms of these endeavors. However, I also wanted to share with people that soon, and I don't have a date yet, though I will share it liberally once I do, the next big event for me, aside from, of course, this event in Ocala, is a national broadcast of our story on Paranormal Witness. I believe it will probably be the season opener for them sometime in late January or early February on the Sci-Fi Network, and it is the first time that our story is being told. It's not about The Conjuring. It's it involves interviews with 5 of the 7 members of the family. So I think that people will find it very compelling, at moments probably gut-wrenching, but at least they'll be getting the true story from the lips of those who experienced it. So I'm looking forward to that, and the year ahead I expect some wonderful things will occur, and I'll be traveling with George and finishing the book, and it's going to be a great 2015, and thanks for the opportunity to share that. And I invite people to follow me on Facebook. There are any number of venues. Just Google my name and you can pick a place to latch in. But if you want to have some direct contact with me, Facebook's probably the fastest, best way to do that because it is the official home of the paranormal.
Yes, it is.
It's the other dimension, isn't it?
It is. It certainly is.
Yeah. George, what are your last comments?
I only just recently discovered that professional wrestling was fake, and it's a new dynamic in my life now that things have been a facade for too long, and I need to wake up. No, I just I want to thank you for this opportunity for all of us to come on here and get a chance to first give a little bit of background for ourselves. I mean, for those people that are going to listen to this broadcast and are interested in coming out to this event, it's almost an introduction, so that there needs no introduction when we get to meet them at the Seven Sisters Inn the weekend of the 24th. I am looking forward to getting together with some old friends and some new friends and just having an exciting and wonderful time. As Andrea said, we do a World Awakening on Tuesdays. I also host with Mr. Michael Moeller on Monday nights, 9 p.m., Primetime Paranormal, also on Blog Talk Radio. It is, again, an important message, whether it's a venue such as a paranormal reality experience that Maria and Bob Schmidt are holding in Ocala, Florida at the Seven Sisters Inn, or it's a radio show such as what you are doing, what we are doing, that's important to move this field in the right direction, and always keeping constant communication open and finding out new discoveries in this field. And there are so many that still are out there undiscovered in this undiscovered country that we just need to hopefully get the word out there, expose, and show people that there is something to believe in. For those who don't have the faith, we want to give that to them about the afterlife, the spirit, and how we will endure as our energies leave this world and go into the next world after that. And, by the way, John Zaffis' favorite is certainly Dunkin' Donuts, Bob, so that you're aware of that.
Yes, that's certainly the type of coffee that we make, so we'll have a heads up with that. And that, too, just like bacon, is a 24-hour commodity. So, John, don't worry. We'll have it for you around the clock, okay?
Do I get to put a request in? Do I get to put a request in?
Yes,
Because
of course.
I'm all on board with the Dunkin' Donuts, and John will drink it at any temperature, and it doesn't seem to matter what gets poured into it. But I have a particular penchant for Coffee Mate hazelnut creamer, not the low-fat kind, because that seems
of course not.
Okay.
We try to do that.
Now you're being a diva.
Don't even get me going, Lopez. Don't even.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, we don't serve anything low fat, so just don't worry about it.
Thank you, because Bacon Boy seems to be getting on my last nerve right now.
Yeah, and I make some pretty impressive stovetop espresso too, if that helps you too.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
We'll work that all out.
Okay. All right. So what's John got up his sleeve?
Yeah, John, are you still awake?
Well, I'm basically looking forward to this. I've heard about the Seven Sister Inn for many years. I'm looking forward to meeting everybody. Again, the group that is going down, everybody that will be there. You know, we all like to intermingle with everybody, socialize, and share a lot of information. And I am just definitely looking so forward to it and, you know, meeting everybody. I think it's going to be a great time. And if somebody comes and they don't have a good time, it's their own fault.
Exactly.
There you go.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. The only concern I have here, and I can't understand this, Maria, Bob, every single one of the rooms in the inn are themed. You have the Cairo room, you have the Beijing room, you have the Paris room. How in the hell did Zappos get the dungeon?
We were leaving that as a surprise now, and we just ruined it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You blew it, George. You blew it.
George, we'll put the dehumidifier in there in the dungeon. It won't be too awful.
Party's in the dungeon.
John, you're going to have to bring that that possessed bondage suit you've got.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bring that, John.
Next topic, guys.
That right there just reminded me of that scene from Monty Python's Meaning of Life, that dungeon scene.
Just reminded me of the Princess Bride.
We'll slide his bacon under the door.
Yeah.
And his Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
Yeah, but if the dungeon is used for torture, then what you do is you slide the bacon under the door and you put it approximately 1 inch away from George's mouth, but he's bound.
Oh, George.
Poor George, on his birthday.
I'll call upon every Seven Sister spirit to manifest and push that bacon that extra inch.
Wow.
That's cute.
Well, I want to thank you very much for inviting me on your broadcast tonight. It is an honor to be among this group of people and to be part of the launch of your new broadcast. And I know that it will be extremely successful. And, please let me be the first to say that I will do everything in my power, I know George will as well, to promote this, because we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what some people seem to forget. Unfortunately, in this community, a lot of the attacks and the bloodletting that occurs comes from within. A scrutiny so intense that it discourages people from going forward. And we're all about encouraging people and all about sharing information. And there's no such thing as competition around here with us.
Absolutely.
This is about getting a message out to humanity, and it is the penultimate purpose behind what we do. So please let us know in whatever way we can assist you in getting your word out and your message out. I'd be happy to do that.
And I invite everybody who is on the show tonight a definite welcome back anytime. Just let me know. And another thing too, as I cannot give enough thanks to Maria. Thank you, Maria, for I think that
I say that we're so proud, Paul, that the Conscious Radio Network took off on a platform, saluting all these wonderful people that that we're surrounded with today at our event. And what a privilege, And with that, we will crack that champagne bottle on this network tonight and know that we have a bunch of people here that are invested as your first guests, and now we become spiritual owners of this network.
Definitely. I hope you have another bottle of Dom Perignon, because you better save that other bottle before when I get there.
I'll take that coffee. I want that coffee.
But, historically, we'll look back that we all sat together at a round table of discussion on this night, and we'll have a historical event attached to it and new memories formed. So that's kind of a cool thing to think about.
Yeah.
So thank you again for the privilege.
Thank you. You're welcome.
It is.
Definitely.
And the thing is, it won't be long before you've built your family in the same way that we build our World Awakening family. The people who comment after our show every week who are just so enthralled with the new information that is imparted to them and how it changes their life. And that's reason enough to keep going. It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 20 or 200 or 2,000. It doesn't matter. If it's changing someone's life, it's all to the good.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Exactly. Yep. Cool. Any words. I've kind of, I want to thank everybody again, and I am very looking forward to the next couple. I can't wait till the 4th. Actually, the 23rd and 24th. But, I literally can't wait, and it's like Christmas all over. Actually, it feels like Christmas.
And Halloween.
and Halloween at the same time.
Yeah. Well, you guys might even get to witness Andrea practicing feng shui on Zappos.
Uh-oh, watch out. That room's going to be all rearranged. It's going to be tough.
I think she's getting ready to feng shui me again.
Yeah, it's a stage show unlike any other.
I'm going to be haunted with that image now through the rest of the evening. Thank you.
There's going to be furniture from the ceiling, you know.
You know, Maria, there's a lot to be said for brainwashing. There are images that need to be washed out of our brains.
Yes.
Probably will.
Oh, wow. Well, anyway, everybody, I want to congratulate also everybody for being part of our premiere show, and can't wait to meet everybody in person, and also I definitely see a future in this event of it getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I would definitely would like to be part of that and helping, building that network in our community.
Well, you already are, so thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, there's an old saying, and I believe very strongly in it. You build it, and they will come.
Exactly. Yep.
It's so old that it's been around since John himself. In fact, I think he wrote it.
Now, would you like me to share how long I know Andrea?
No, actually, nobody wants you to share that, John. I think we're just about out of time here.
Oh, boy, how fast we've changed our tone.
I think we have 6 minutes.
Hey, P.T. Barnum is calling me right now, I think, here.
John took us to his grave when we were in Connecticut. So, yes, it's entirely conceivable that he is on the air with us right now.
That's right.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Zappos built the pyramids.
Oh, boy,
No.
I wish I did.
No, Zappos watched the aliens build the pyramids. That's different. He sat there and applauded.
Man. Well, I'll let everybody go, and I just wanted to thank everybody again for the last time until we meet again in a couple weeks. Live long and prosper. And this is Paul Mekas, host of Conscious Radio Network and co-host Justin Wassel. Thank you everybody again, and we will see you next week, next Sunday from 7 till 11 p.m. on Conscious Radio Network. Thank you.
This is the Conscious Radio